Hey there, friends. I have something really special for you today. Have you ever felt like something was just a little off in your world? Maybe a shadow moved where it shouldn't, or a familiar place suddenly felt strange. Well, join me on this eerie journey as I share my story, The Long Walk Home. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. But before we dive in, I have something special just for you. Introducing LipoSlend, the natural at-home liposuction method that helps you lose weight while you sleep. Imagine waking up lighter and refreshed, thanks to our special blend of ingredients like sulforaphane and cis quadrangularis. It works to keep fat away and helps your body manage weight easily. And there's more! Order today and get 2 free bonuses. Flawless skin secrets for tightening skin after weight loss and primal desserts for guilt-free sweets. Plus, enjoy free shipping on every order. Ready to change your nights and your body? Click the link in the description below to grab your discounted LipoSlend and start your journey to a healthier you. Now let's begin our story. Every day, I walk home the same way. The path is familiar, like a warm blanket wrapping around me. The houses stand tall, their windows glowing softly in the night. The trees sway gently, whispering secrets to one another. But one night, something felt different. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I noticed the houses looked strange. The colors were too bright, too vivid, as if someone had painted them with a brush that didn't know when to stop. The trees, usually comforting, seemed to twist and bend in odd shapes, their branches reaching out like long fingers trying to grab me. I shook my head, thinking maybe I was just tired. After all, it had been a long day. But as I continued my walk, a chill crept down my spine. The streetlights flickered, casting shadows that danced in ways I had never seen before. I quickened my pace, hoping to shake off the unease that was settling in my stomach like a heavy stone. Then I heard a low, rumbling sound. It was like the growl of a hungry animal, but it didn't come from any bushes or alleys. It seemed to echo all around me, vibrating through the ground. My heart raced as I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind me. But there was nothing there, just the empty street stretching out behind me. I took a deep breath and kept walking, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But the houses began to shift in my vision, their windows turning into dark, hollow eyes watching me. I could almost hear them whispering, their voices a soft murmur that sent shivers down my spine. Turn back, they seemed to say. You don't belong here. I stumbled, feeling the ground beneath me shift slightly. It was like walking on a tightrope, and I was terrified of falling into whatever lay below. The trees loomed closer now, their branches reaching out like claws, scratching the air. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the pavement. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of the street. It was a shadowy silhouette, standing still under the flickering street lamp. My heart pounded louder, drowning out the eerie sounds around me. I squinted, trying to see who or what it was. But as I took a step closer, the figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving only a cold emptiness behind. I turned to run, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly before me. The familiar turns and corners twisted into something unrecognizable. Panic surged through me as I realized I was lost in my own neighborhood, a place I had walked countless times before. As I stumbled forward, the world around me began to change more drastically. The houses warped and twisted, their walls bending in unnatural ways. A low fog rolled in, wrapping around my legs like icy fingers. I could hear the whispers growing louder, echoing in my ears like a haunting lullaby, urging me to stop, to turn around, to forget this path. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving to find my way home. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes on me, watching, waiting. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. I glanced at the trees again, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw faces in the bark, twisted and contorted in agony. Help me, they seemed to cry, their voices a blend of sorrow and despair. I stumbled backward, my breath quickening. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and I didn't know how to wake up. The path twisted and turned, leading me deeper into this surreal labyrinth. I could feel the darkness closing in, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I spotted a light flickering in the distance. Hope surged in my chest. Maybe it was a way out, a way back to normalcy. I started to run, my feet pounding against the pavement, desperate to reach that light. But the closer I got, the more the light flickered, as if it were teasing me, pulling me in only to push me away. As I reached the edge of the light, I realized it was coming from a house. But this house was different. It stood alone, surrounded by a thick mist that swirled like a living thing. The windows were dark, but I could feel a strange energy radiating from within. I hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. What could be inside? Would it be a way back to safety, or would it lead me deeper into this nightmare? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. I turned the knob and stepped inside, ready to face whatever horrors awaited me. I stepped inside, and the door creaked ominously behind me, shutting with a thud that echoed in the dark. The air inside was thick with dust, and I could feel it settling on my skin like a heavy blanket. A chill ran through the room, causing me to shiver, even though my heart raced. The dim light from the walls flickered weakly, casting strange shadows that seemed to dance along with my growing fear. I took a step farther into the house, squinting to see. The living room was cluttered with old furniture that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Dusty chairs, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly, and a coffee table covered in yellowed papers all filled the room. But then I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, expecting to see a rat or some other small creature. Instead, I saw a figure looming just beyond the edge of the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. The figure stood still, almost blending into the shadows around it. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark shape watching me silently. "What do you want?" I tried to say, but my voice came out shaky and barely a whisper. The figure didn't respond, but I felt a deep chill wash over me, as if it was feeding off my fear. I glanced around, searching for an exit, but all I could see were walls closing in, with the heavy mist from outside creeping through the cracks in the windows like a sneaky thief. Just then, I realized there were more shapes hiding in the darkness. They were everywhere, lurking behind the furniture, hiding in the corners, watching me with hollow eyes. I felt a sensation of being trapped, a feeling that made my heart pound so loudly I thought it would burst. Before I could run, the shadowy figures began to move closer. I turned to flee toward the door, but it slammed shut with a deafening bang that echoed throughout the house. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, desperate to escape whatever was closing in on me. The whispers grew louder, swirling in my head like a tornado. "Help us," they moaned, their voices distorted and haunting. I stumbled backward until my back hit the dusty wall. My desperation pushed me to look for another exit, and I darted toward a hallway lined with dark doorways. As I ventured into the hallway, my instinct screamed at me to go back. Each door looked the same, heavy and foreboding, with rusted handles that seemed to mock me. I hesitated, my heart racing, mindful of what might lurk behind each one. With no other choice, I reached for the first doorknob, feeling a wave of dread wash over me as it turned with a click. I pushed the door open slowly, cringing at the creak it made. Inside was a small room filled with faded photographs. But these weren't just any photos. They were of people looking directly at me with eyes full of sorrow. Their faces were twisted in anguish, as if they were frozen in a moment of despair, and it sent chills down my spine. Without thinking, I backed away from the door, only to hear a soft, delicate laugh echoing from the shadows in the room. I froze, frozen in place by a mixture of fear and curiosity. The shadows began to shift, taking the form of a small girl. Her hair hung down in tangled clumps, and her dress was tattered, like something from a forgotten time. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It sent a shudder through me. "You shouldn't be here." I was just walking home," I stammered, my voice shaking. "I don't understand what's happening." She tilted her head, her expression vacant. The house wants you. It needs you, she replied softly, stepping closer, her small feet making no sound on the floorboards. The more she approached, the stronger the feeling of dread grew, making it hard to breathe. Everyone who comes here never leaves. I felt bile rise in my throat. I turned to leave, but despair filled the air, wrapping around me like a net. The moment I stepped back into the hallway, the shadows swirled violently, pulling me in every direction. I felt like I was in a nightmarish storm, one that was trying to keep me trapped in its grip. I darted down the hall, frantically checking each door as I passed. The figures watched as I stumbled blindly toward the end of the hallway, feeling their eyes on my back. My heart raced, pounding louder than the whispers. I was so close to breaking free, yet the darkness clung to me like a wet blanket. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hall stood ajar, shining with a blue light. I hurled myself toward it, thinking it might be the exit I so desperately sought. As I burst through, I found myself in a small kitchen that looked untouched, as if frozen in time. A round table sat in the center, set for dinner with plates full of moldy food and a flickering candle in the middle that sputtered ominously. But what caught my eye wasn't the food or the table. It was the mirror hanging above it. My heart sank as I saw my reflection, except it wasn't just me. Behind me stood the girl and all the other shadowy figures, grinning with twisted joy as if they were watching a show. Their faces were lit by the candle's flicker, twisting and distorting, taking on grotesque features that made my blood run cold. "Join us for dinner," the girl said sweetly, her eyes wide, yet empty. The figures behind her echoed her invitation with sinister laughter that sent shivers through my whole body. I turned to run again, but the door slammed shut. I was trapped in this awful place, surrounded by the specters of despair. The laughter, the whispers, the shadows all swirled around me, pulling me toward the table like a moth to a flame. I didn't want to be part of their dinner, whatever that meant. I put my hands on the table, trying to steady myself, but it felt cold and clammy beneath my palms. The figures drew closer, inching toward me, their dark eyes glowing with hunger. "Leave while you still can," the girl said, her voice suddenly serious. "It's the only way to escape them." With that, the kitchen began to spin, the walls closing in, and all the shadows lunged toward me as the blue light flickered chaotically, illuminating their horrific faces. I was falling into darkness, and I knew I had to fight back before it consumed me forever. The kitchen spun faster, and I felt dizzy as fear wrapped around my mind like a vice. I knew I had to fight back, to break free from the grasp of whatever was trying to drag me into this nightmare. Clenching my fists, I took a deep breath and looked around for anything I could use to defend myself. The shadows were closing in, their whispers rising into a gelid crescendo. They urged me to join them at the table, to submit, to become a part of this horrifying feast. I spotted a heavy, tarnished knife lying among the moldy food on the table. Without thinking, I reached for it, gripping the cold metal tightly in my hand. The moment I grasped it, a jolt of warmth surged through me, as if the knife was imbuing me with courage against the encroaching darkness. "Get back!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the kitchen with a strength I didn't feel. The figures hesitated, their laughter dying down, replaced by a chilling silence. They seemed taken aback, momentarily thrown off by my sudden burst of bravery. But it was just a moment. The girl's twisted smile returned, and she pointed a finger at me. "You think you can scare us?" she taunted, her voice turning sour. "You're already one of us." With that, the shadows surged forward, and I realized they weren't just figures. They were a collective force, driven by a longing to consume, to merge. Panic clawed at my throat. I sidestepped the table, my heart racing faster, and the cold knife felt heavy in my hand. I couldn't let them take me. I bolted toward the door, but the figures blocked my path. They moved in synchrony, forming a wall of darkness that seemed to breathe and pulse, alive with twisted intent. Desperation coursed through me, and I felt the energy of the room changing again. With every flicker of the candlelight, the shadows grew more defined, their features sharpening into grotesque masks of anguish and rage. "Leave!" I yelled again, brandishing the knife in front of me like a shield. My heart raced, and I could feel my breaths coming in short gasps. The shadows recoiled slightly, but still closed in on me. In a moment of sheer insanity, I lunged toward the nearest figure, swinging the knife wildly. My arm moved on instinct, driven by a primal urge to survive. The knife cut through the air, and I felt a strange, electric thrill as it connected with something solid. A piercing shriek filled the room, echoing into 1,000 voices, as one of the figures disintegrated into a swirl of mist and darkness. As it vanished, the others hesitated further, their forms flickering like fading stars. It was a brief opening, and I took advantage of it. I sprinted for the exit, adrenaline propelling me forward. The shadows howled in fury, their whispers morphing into guttural screams as they lunged after me. But I was fueled by the thought of escaping this maddening realm. I reached the kitchen door and flung it open. In the next room, I could see a staircase leading downward, half hidden by thick shadows. Without a moment's pause, I dove into the abyss, hoping it would lead me away from whatever horrors awaited me upstairs. I tumbled down the stairs, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. The moment I hit the bottom, I heard the door above slam shut, sealing off my pursuers. The air was cooler down here, and what light there was flickered around me. I found myself in a narrow corridor, the walls lined with peeling wallpaper and strange murals depicting scenes of sorrow. As I moved deeper into the passage, I could feel the vibrations of the whispers from above, growing faint but still insistent. I followed the corridor, my breath quieting as I focused on putting space between myself and the shadows. But just as I thought I was safe, a door swung open at the end of the hallway, revealing a dimly lit room filled with mirrors. It looked like an endless maze, reflections bouncing back in my direction, their surfaces swirling with dark fog. A sinking feeling settled in my gut, but my curiosity pulled me forward. I stepped closer to the first mirror, peering into it, and gasped as I saw not just my reflection, but the faces of other trapped souls. They pressed against the glass, their mouths opening in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Each face was someone I recognized, someone I had seen in the photos earlier, each one trapped in the same nightmare as I was. "Help us," they mouthed, their faces contorting in anguish as their fingers scratched at the surface, trying to break free. I staggered back, horror flooding through me. This was the fate the little girl warned me about. This was what happened to those who lingered too long in the house. Suddenly, the mirrors began to ripple, the glass warping as if it were made of water. I felt a pull, a magnetic force trying to draw me toward them. I fought against it, knowing that I couldn't let myself be trapped here. Loud laughter erupted from behind me, chilling my bones. I turned around quickly, and the girl stood there again, now surrounded by the other figures I had thought I escaped. Their faces twisted into grotesque smiles, mirroring the agony of the trapped souls in the mirrors. "You're one of us now, whether you like it or not," she taunted, her voice dripping with malice. In that moment, I felt my surroundings begin to close in again. The corridor constricted, the walls pressing closer, and the whispers rose to a crescendo, pushing me toward the mirrors. Adrenaline surged through me once more, and in a burst of energy, I sprinted away from them, deeper into the twisting maze of reflections. Each time I glanced over my shoulder, I could see the figures darting in and out of the mirrors, their dark forms moving unnaturally fast. They were gaining on me, the laughter ringing in my ears, festering my fears. I needed to find a way out, but the hallway twisted and turned, disorienting me, every mirror looking the same. Finally, I spotted a gleaming light at the end of a junction. Hope ignited in my heart, and I raced towards it, my footsteps echoing in the suffocating silence, drowning out the whispers. As I reached the light, I pushed through the doorway and found myself in a small room, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. But as I entered, the door slammed shut behind me, and the room erupted in shadows. The figures surrounded me, their laughter booming, creating a cacophony of chaos that filled the small space. "Welcome to our home," they jeered, their voices blending into one unsettling melody as they advanced, eager to claim what they believed was theirs. "No!" I shouted, my heart racing as the shadows pressed closer, a wave of despair washing over me. I backed away until my back hit the wall. With nowhere left to run, I felt the weight of dread wrap around me, squeezing tighter as I prepared myself for what was coming. But then, in that moment of vulnerability, a new thought sparked in my mind. Perhaps I didn't have to fight or flee. Did I dare negotiate with this strange reality? They had tried to consume me, to trap me, but maybe there was a way to understand the darkness instead of resisting it. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself and faced them, ready to confront the truth of this house and its haunting. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice shaky but firm. "What do you want from me?" The figures paused, their laughter fading into an eerie silence. They seemed to exchange glances, their eyes glinting in the dim light, curious about my sudden willingness to engage. The girl stepped forward, her twisted smile softening slightly, as if intrigued. "We are lost," she said, her voice low and sorrowful. "We need you to understand what happened here. Only then can we be free." "Free?" I echoed, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't understand how I could help them. With every inch closer they moved, I felt the stifling energy envelop me. "What do you need me to do?" The shadows shifted, and the atmosphere grew thick with tension. "You have to remember," the girl said, her tone now pleading. "You must relive the pain we endured," she continued, the words wrapping around me like chains. "Only then can the cycle be broken and our souls set free." I hesitated, fear gripping me again, but curiosity urged me to ask, "What is the pain you suffered? What is this cycle?" She floated closer, her form shimmering as if being seen through water. "Years ago, this house was filled with life, joy, and laughter. But then it changed. Darkness seeped in as despair took root," she explained, her eyes glistening. "People came here, seeking solace or escape. They stayed too long. They disappeared, trapped in an eternal feast of their own making." A shiver ran down my spine. The faces in the mirrors flashed in my mind, their silent screams tormenting me. You were one of them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The girl nodded slowly, her expression transforming into one of sorrow. "We all were. Each one of us holds a piece of that history," she said. "You stand at the precipice now. Either you embrace what happened or become the next victim of the house." Their words echoed in my mind, creating a chilling resonance. The thought of being trapped within the walls of this monstrous place, forever lost like them, clawed at my thoughts. "So how do I embrace it?" I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying my courage. "Walk through the memories," she instructed, gesturing to the walls, which began to shimmer. Suddenly, the peeling wallpaper vanished, replaced by vivid images of the past. I could see glimpses of laughter, vibrant gatherings filled with joy, and then the darkness creeping in, something sinister lurking just out of view. As I watched, the revelry turned chaotic. The expressions of joy contorted into fear, and laughter echoed into agonized screams. Guests turned on one another, confusion invading their minds as they realized they were trapped, caught in a web of darkness that wound tighter and tighter. I stepped back, horror flooding my senses. Each image felt like a punch to my gut, a painful reminder of inescapable despair. I gasped, "I can't go through this. I can't take it. Do you want to live?" The girl shot back, her voice suddenly sharp. "Every moment you resist this place, you give it more power. You must understand the cause of our sorrow." Resentment festered in me, but the weight of her words slowly pierced through my fear. I realized she was right. I had to face this darkness to escape. Gritting my teeth, I nodded. "Okay, I'll try." With that, the room transformed further, the walls vibrating with a painful intensity. I felt a sudden pull, drawing me toward the swirling images, with the figures surrounding me whispering encouragement. I stepped forward, the air growing heavier, the world around me distorting as I crossed the threshold into another memory. In an instant, I was in the thrumming heart of a lively event. Music filled the air, and laughter rang out like bells. I was surrounded by beautifully dressed people, their hands raised in joyous celebration. The warmth of the moment enveloped me, and for a moment, I felt safe. But as I turned, the atmosphere shifted. The music began to distort, and the people's faces twisted, their smiles fading into terrifying grimaces of fear. I was standing in the midst of an elegant dinner party, rich with promises of happiness. But beneath the surface was an undercurrent of dread. I watched as a darkness crept into the room, a shadow slithering across the floor, slipping under tables and into the hearts of those present. Panic gripped me when the lights flickered, and I saw it clearly, a dark figure moving among the guests. One by one, they began to scream, eyes wide with terror as the darkness enveloped them. "No!" I shouted, trying to reach out to them, but my hands went through air. I was just a spectator, powerless. The figure, shrouded in black, seemed to feed off the chaos, growing larger with every scream. I could feel its malevolent energy washing over me, seeking to snatch me up and pull me into its depths. The laughter turned to chilling wails that echoed in the room, piercing my heart with despair. "Remember," the girl's voice shouted from somewhere far away. "You must understand." With effort, I forced myself to focus on the scene. I needed to see beyond the chaos and understand what the people didn't know. Straining against the wave of dark energy, I searched for the source. The moment it all changed. Then I saw it, a man standing alone, his face gaunt and hollow. He was watching, not participating, as the festivities swirled around him. Suddenly, the darkness turned toward him. The moment his eyes met the shadow, I felt a tremor run through the room, as if time slowed. I realized he was the catalyst, the one who opened the door to despair with his coldness. He didn't participate in the joy, allowing the darkness to spread, infecting everyone around him. Then, in a heartbeat, the guests began to turn on one another, fueled by suspicion and paranoia. Fights broke out, and in that place meant for celebration, blood spilled onto the elegant floor, tainting the scene. I screamed silently, horrified at the sight. As the wails of anguish filled my ears, I had a revelation. The cycle of despair was rooted in the choices made by each person. The darkness thrived on their isolation, their unwillingness to connect. If I could break that connection, if I could find a way to reach them, perhaps it could change everything. I reached deeper into my memories, pulling out the warmth from when I first entered the house, the glimmers of hope I had felt in moments of shared laughter. "You can escape this," I called out, my voice rising above the cacophony. "You don't have to stay trapped." The moment my words pierced the air, the dark figure hesitated. The shadows around it flickered, the faces of the partygoers turning to look at me, confusion replacing terror. I could see glimmers of recognition within them, a spark of hope lighting their eyes. "Connect," I shouted. "You have to trust each other. Love will break this cycle." The transformation was instantaneous. As I spoke, the figure began to wane, retreating as the guests reached for one another, hands clasping tightly despite the chaos. I caught glimpses of smiles amid the fear, laughter pushing back the darkness. They started to rise, pulling together, forming a circle of unity against the shadow that threatened to consume them. The dark figure shrieked, twisting and writhing as if caught in a storm. I felt its strength faltering, feeding off their anger and suspicion. With every sparkle of connection, the shadow shrank until it collapsed into a swirling mass, dissipating into nothingness. But just as the atmosphere turned to triumph, I was pulled back, the twist of reality dragging me from the scene. I landed back in the small room, the figures surrounding me, their expressions filled with awe. "You felt it," the girl gasped, her eyes wide with realization. "You changed it." "I saw it," I replied breathlessly. "I understand now." You can't let fear and greed overshadow the love you once shared. The shadows began to fade, their forms becoming lighter, merging into a soft glow. You are the key, they whispered, their unity growing stronger. As they drifted closer, I felt their warmth wrapping around me, lifting the suffocating weight of despair. You have given us hope, the girl said, her voice resonating with strength. In your hands lies the way to free us all. The shadows began to fade, their forms becoming lighter, merging into a soft glow. You have given us hope, they whispered, their unity growing stronger. As they drifted closer, I felt their warmth wrapping around me, lifting the suffocating weight of despair. But just as the warmth enveloped me, a sudden chill shot through the room, knocking the feeling away like a wave retreating from the shore. The glow flickered like a candle in the wind, fading until it left nothing but darkness clinging to the corners. A heaviness settled in the air, and I instinctively glanced around, my heart racing. The whispers had turned ominous, echoing threats that curled around my mind. You think you can save them? A low voice hissed from the shadows. It was deeper now, filled with venom, throbbing against the walls like a heartbeat. They are beyond redemption. The girl stepped back, her expression shifting to one of anguish. No, you can't, she cried, but her voice was swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Just then, the air thickened, twisting and writhing, forming shapes that lunged toward me. I barely had time to react. The darkness was alive. It seeped into my lungs, filling me with cold dread. I staggered backward, the room spinning again as distorted faces pressed against the walls, their twisted features howling silently. I found myself trapped in a web of terror, carefully woven with memories of despair. Then I remembered the images I'd seen, the man who had betrayed the celebration. Fear surged within me. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a punishment sustained by the negative energy of each soul drawn into the cycle of despair. In my gut, I sensed this was not just about their release, but my own. If I didn't fight off this darkness, I would become a part of it too, fading into the madness around me. Look within, I shouted into the suffocating gloom. You have to confront what you've become. My voice rang out weakly, but resolutely. Suddenly, the swirling darkness intensified, swirling like a tempest around me. Frightening images erupted as if the room itself were splattered with their memories. I found myself in the center of a dilapidated living room, furniture upended, shadows flitting beneath tattered curtains. There was a table set for dinner, plates cracked and strewn with dust. As I moved closer, I saw a family, once joyful, now only echoes of despair. They were screaming at each other, voices colliding with ferocity, the tension palpable. At the head of the table sat the same gaunt man, his eyes hollow, flickering with a dark flame that seemed to draw anger from everyone around him. Stop! I cried, desperate to intercede. You have to remember the love. But my words fell into the cacophony of rage. Chairs scraped violently against the floor, the clatter echoing like thunder as the arguments spiraled into chaos. There was a flash of a knife glinting under the flickering light, and in an instant, it plunged into one of the guests, the scream echoing loudly in my ears. Blood splattered across the table, illuminating the faces of those who remained twisted in horror. I felt bile rise in my throat, the sight overwhelming me. As the darkness thickened, feeding off their rage and fear, it cloaked me in a suffocating shroud. This can't be the end, I whispered to myself, grappling with the realization that I had to face the truth of this moment, to help them break free from the tendrils of despair. Look beyond the darkness, I shouted again, focusing all my energy into my voice. See the light that once was. With a sudden jolt, the room shifted and warped. I was thrown back into the corridor of mirrors where I had first seen the trapped souls. Here, too, shadows drifted closer, their faces contorted in agony, clawing at their reflection. They screamed silently as I stood before them, their desperate pleas battering against my mind. But now I felt different. I could taste the strength of hope growing inside me. It was a flicker, but it blazed in the shadows. I reached for the closest mirror, shattering through the despair that wrapped around it. "You are not trapped," I insisted, my voice steady. "You can choose." As I struck the mirror, shards scattered, glinting angrily in the air. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the light burst forth from the fragments, illuminating faces etched with fear and regret. "Look at what you've created," I pressed, emotions flooding me. "You were loved once, and you can love again." And as I spoke those words, warmth began to fill the air. Glimmers of light erupted from each reflective surface, cascading around me like 1,000 stars bursting into existence. In that moment, the shadows shrieked, their forms disintegrating against the light like fog burned away by the sun. But just as the shadows began to fade, a chilling wave swept over me, twisting my gut. The darkness lashed back, more furious than before, feeding off my vulnerability. "You cannot fight the inevitable," it roared, the sound clawing at my skin. "We will consume you." Realizing I was on the verge of being overwhelmed, I closed my eyes and concentrated, letting the warmth of hope blanket me. I pulled from my own memories, moments of laughter, connections with loved ones, and infused them with a fiery energy. "You do not own me," I shouted defiantly. In that instant, a powerful light erupted from my core, bursting forth like the dawn breaking through the night. The shadows writhed and twisted, trying to withstand the explosion of light, but it was too strong. They were being banished. One last desperate scream echoed through the room, a sound filled with rage and despair, then faded as the light engulfed everything around me. I felt myself lifted by the energy, floating in an ethereal space, free from physical confines. I was suspended in a moment of tranquility, surrounded by swirling lights, a kaleidoscope of souls. And then, slowly, I began to see their faces emerge, faces of those I had fought to save. They smiled, their eyes filled with gratitude, and for the first time, their pain seemed distant. "Thank you," they whispered, voices harmonizing in a beautiful melody. "You freed us." But before I could respond, I felt the ground shift beneath me, and I was pulled back into the house. Now, the darkness had retreated, leaving the air still and heavy with a thick silence. The walls, once alive with energy, felt drained, as if the house itself had exhaled, the oppressive weight lifted. But as I regained my bearings, unease settled in. Had I truly defeated the darkness? Or was it merely lying in wait, lurking in the shadows? As I stepped forward, the floor creaked beneath me, the sound echoing in the stillness. A cold draft swept through the corridor, wrapping around me like a familiar embrace, sending chills dancing down my spine. I sensed something was still wrong. I glanced over my shoulder, but saw only the empty hallway behind me. Was there something left to face? In that moment, the flickering light overhead buzzed and died. The room was plunged into darkness again, but this time it felt different. A heavy silence wrapped around me, trapping me in an unseen grasp, and I instinctively reached for the knife I had discarded earlier. A soft rustle behind me broke the stillness, like a whisper of movement. I turned sharply, gripping the knife tightly. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence, and the anticipation hung in the air. Then, very slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was her, the girl with the twisted smile, her face now devoid of light. But it was not just her. Behind her loomed the other silhouettes, their expressions blank, eyes hollow and empty like the void surrounding them. "You thought you could escape?" she said, her voice low and taunting, sending a shiver through me. "You are part of this now, whether you like it or not." Fear washed over me, but within it, a flicker of defiance ignited. "I won't give in," I vowed, brandishing the knife. "I set you free." The girl smirked, slowly shaking her head. "You freed nothing. You only pushed us away for now. The darkness will return, because it is in all of you." With that, the shadows surged toward me, swirling like a storm about to unleash its fury. My heart raced as I faced them, every instinct screaming for me to run. But I stood my ground, knowing that if I faltered now, I would lose everything. "No!" I shouted, channeling every ounce of courage within me. As they closed in, I struck the knife downward into the floor, feeling the energy pulse beneath me, a low hum thrumming through the darkness. Light erupted from the blade as I channeled my will into it, sending shockwaves rippling outward, illuminating the room. The shadows recoiled with agony, shrieks clawing at my eardrums, a deafening sound echoing as they dissolved into nothingness. It was a fleeting victory, but I knew better than to think I had defeated them. I glanced around, breathing heavily, feeling the remnants of the darkness clawing at the edges of my consciousness. I needed to find a way out before it returned, stronger than ever, before I lost myself completely. But the house was changing again. The walls pulsed, the shadows creeping back around me, and I realized there was an urgency in my heart. I had to escape this place, this manifestation of despair, before I became its prisoner like so many souls before me. The fear began to resonate, flooding my body and overwhelming my senses. Every instinct urged me to move, to find an exit, to flee from the rising tide. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, the energy pulsating in my veins as cracks formed in the floorboards beneath my feet, a reminder of the darkness still lurking just below the surface. With every step, the grip of fear tightened, steering me toward what I hoped would be freedom. The air around me felt electric, crackling with unseen energy, and the shadows seemed to slither closer, whispering dark intentions that curled around my mind like smoke. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out the eerie silence that had enveloped the house. I raced down the hallway, dim light flickering sporadically from the overhead bulbs, casting long, distorted shadows that danced against the walls. The floorboards creaked beneath me like a haunting echo of footsteps from a long-forgotten time. Each sound made me glance back, half expecting to see the girl and the twisted figures looming, ready to pull me back into their suffocating grasp. As I reached the end of the corridor, I turned sharply into a room that smelled musty, like something had died here long ago. Dust motes floated in the dim light, and my footsteps stirred up clouds that hung heavy in the air. There, in the center, was an old mirror, its glass cracked and tarnished, reflecting a distorted version of myself. I hesitated, remembering the dark connections this house held, wondering if perhaps it was a portal to something worse. Just as I approached, the mirror rippled, and a face appeared within the glass. One of the guests from the party, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream. I stepped back, heart racing, feeling the chill creep into my bones. I could see the room behind him, chaos reigning as chairs toppled and shadows fought for control. The reflection reached out, fingers pressing against the glass, desperate to escape, and I felt an unnatural pull toward it, like the depths of the water calling a drowning soul. "Help me!" His voice echoed, broken and filled with anguish. "You can't let it win." Feeling the weight of his plea, my instinct said to flee, but a strange compulsion held me there. "What happened?" I gasped, my voice shaky against the mounting dread. His eyes darted off to the side, panic rising as if he could sense something lurking behind me. "It's coming for you," he shouted, and in that instant, the darkness surged, tendrils stretching from the corners of the room, coiling around my ankles like cold fingers grasping for a hold. I stumbled back, yanking myself free, but it was too late. I could feel it tighten, pulling me closer to the mirror. "No!" I screamed, kicking wildly and stumbling back against the wall. The girl's voice echoed around me, combining with the others, each pleading for release, while malevolent laughter slithered through the air like a snake in the grass. I could hear them all, faint whispers that seeped into my mind, sowing seeds of doubt and despair. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, reflecting shards of light in every direction, and for a second, I thought I could escape. But before I could turn to run, a gust of wind swept through the room, carrying shards with it. They sliced through the air like daggers, forcing me to shield my face. In the chaos, I dared not look away from the swirling darkness that now seemed to pulse with sinister life, feeding on the confusion and my rising fear. "I won't let you take me," I cried, clutching the knife tightly as if its presence could stabilize me against the encroaching void. In that moment, the room warped again, shifting and twisting until the darkness warped around me, creating an expansive void that made my heart race faster than ever. I no longer felt the walls, but an endless chasm of black, an abyss that seemed to stretch into infinity. I was weightless, and every instinct screamed for me to fight. I began to chant the words of hope, trying to hold on to the remnants of light that had surged through me earlier. "You are not alone," I shouted with the last ounce of strength in my voice, projecting my thoughts into the swirling mass. "You can break free." The darkness recoiled briefly, a flicker of hesitation that gave me a glimpse of what lay beneath the surface. I saw faces, not just of despair, but also longing, souls trapped by their own fears, shadows of what they had been taken in by the overwhelming grip of doubt. They reached toward me, a collective wail escaping them. But as I drew closer, I could feel their pain wrapping around me, cold and tight, draining my very essence. The faces morphed in agony, and my confidence wavered. What if I couldn't save them? What if they pulled me down with them? "No!" I shouted again, forcing myself to remember the joy that had once filled the air during that celebration, a warmth I had felt when I first entered this house. I focused on that memory, the light that had danced through the window, the laughter that had once echoed in these halls. It was a flicker, but it sparked a fire in my soul. With a surge of determination, I directed that warmth outward. The shadows roared in protest, and in a moment of clarity, I realized I had the power to push back. I swung the knife in front of me, and as it cut through the void, the darkness shimmered, rippled, and began to fragment like shattered glass. "Know your worth," I cried, as strength washed over me in waves, feeling it connect with the others trapped in the inky void. "You can rise above the darkness. The choice is yours." The air began to pulse with energy, and slowly the trapped souls emerged, connecting with my light, pulling me forward as they joined the fight against the shadow. I could hear their voices lifting, harmonizing with mine until we were resonating in beautiful chaos. The darkness writhed, taking on new forms, twisted and hideous, but it was losing its grip. Then I saw them, the shadows of the boy, the girl, the partygoers. They were all now released from their torment, stepping out of the dark swirl with faces marred by fear, yet lighting up with hope. Their hands reached out, grasping mine and forming a chain of unity against the encroaching void. And then darkness came crashing back with a fury, roaring and howling as it clamped down around us, but we stood firm together. "We are not afraid," I shouted, feeling the weight lift, as if the very essence of hope had manifested into a tangible force. A blinding light erupted from our linked hands, illuminating the entire space, scattering the shadows like dust. Faceless figures screamed in agony as the light consumed them, the claws of despair retracting into the nothingness from which they had come. But at the edge of this light, just beyond the horizon of my vision, I could see a shadow brewing, gathering strength. I turned my gaze quickly, but felt a gnawing worry settle within me. Was it really over, or had I simply delayed the inevitable? Then, standing at the brink of the bright glow, I saw the gaunt figure again. The man who had once been at the head of the table, his eyes locked on me, hungry for the chaos he had once orchestrated. "You think you can defeat me?" he sneered, his voice cutting through the bright energy. "Yes," I shouted back, rage fueling my voice. "You feed on fear, but you can't have me." The light surged, and I pushed forward, feeling the energy ripple through the holding hands of the others, each of us drawing strength from one another as we surged toward the darkness hovering at the edge of our glow. But even as we advanced, doubt clawed at the corners of my mind. What if the darkness was stronger? What if it could separate us and strike me down one by one? I pressed on, fighting through the fear that crept in, determined not to be swallowed by despair again. We all took a collective breath, facing the darkness that loomed ominously before us, a reminder that this battle was not yet over. The darkness loomed ominously before us, a swirling mass of dread that clawed at my thoughts. Deep within me, the fear grew like a dark weed, threatening to choke out the hope I had summoned. Still, we pressed on together, a fragile line of light against the night. I could feel the warmth radiating from the hands gripping mine, a lifeline in the darkness. "We can do this," I whispered, trying to reassure myself as much as the others. But doubt shadowed my voice. As we moved closer to the darkness, it shifted, writhing like a living thing. The night around us pulsed, vibrating with a silent scream. Fleeting shadows darted along the edges, whispering hauntingly familiar phrases, echoes of the past collapsing into my mind. "You'll never escape," they taunted. "You can't save them." I forced myself to focus, shutting out their insidious whispers. What would happen if I let fear take hold? Suddenly, the air thickened, a palpable weight pressing down on me. The heat from the light began to fade, and the shadows advanced, eager and ravenous. I looked at the faces of those beside me, fear mirrored in their eyes, but also a flicker of determination that ignited my resolve. "Push forward," I cried, my voice rising above the oppressive silence. Together, as we stepped toward the encroaching darkness, a horrid sight unfolded. Within the shadows, I caught glimpses of twisted faces writhing in agony, trapped in their own nightmares. Their mouths moved in soundless screams, pupils wide with terror, yearning for freedom, yet trapped in an eternal loop of despair. I could almost feel their pain, a cold grip around my heart, threatening to pull me down into that tormenting void. But the more I looked, the more I remembered I had to break this cycle. Then, from the depths of the swirling shadows, the gaunt man emerged fully formed, his hollow eyes fixed upon me. His smile was twisted, a grotesque expression that danced between triumph and rage. "Did you really think they can help you?" he hissed, his voice a dark melody that twisted around my mind. "Their light will only dim. You will be consumed, not if we stand together." I screamed defiantly. My words echoed in the heavy air, breaking the ominous silence that engulfed the room. But as I spoke, the shadows surged, lashing out like frenzied creatures. The light flickered and dimmed, and I felt the grip of my companions loosen. "No!" I yelled, grabbing hold of their hands with all my strength, refusing to let the darkness tear us apart. The man's laughter was deep and reverberated around us, rising like smoke. "Submit to the inevitable," he taunted, the shadows swirling tighter around his form. The energy of the room was shifting, the balance tipping toward despair. I felt my resolve wavering, as if the shadows were reaching deep into my core, feeding on my fear, pulling pieces of my strength away. Memories flowed back to me. Lost hopes, missed opportunities, every moment where I had felt powerless. The images flooded my mind, blurring my focus and weakening my grip. "Stay with me?" I pleaded, looking into the eyes of my companions. Their faces were pale, sweat glistening on their brows, but there was bravery in their stares. I could feel their determination tied to me. But just as I thought I had rallied them, the ground beneath us trembled. A loud crack echoed through the chamber, and the floor erupted into swirling darkness, splitting us apart. I stumbled forward, losing my grip on one of my companions. Panic surged through me as I watched them tumble into the abyss, swallowed without a sound. "No!" I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. The remaining voices urged me onward, pulling me back from the brink of disarray. But shadows crept closer, encasing me in their chilling embrace. Then the gaunt man lunged forward, his hand reaching toward me, shadowy fingers stretching as if to snare me. "Join them!" he bellowed, voice echoing ominously. "You belong with them." In the darkness, I ducked and rolled away, feeling the air grow colder as I moved. The walls of the room creaked, groaning under the weight of despair. A deafening cacophony ruled my ears, a madness of voices pleading, shrieking, and wailing, overlapping and crashing together like waves of a storm. In the frenzy, I caught two hands reaching out to me from the darkness, desperate faces behind them, my lost companions struggling against the pull of the void. "Help us," they cried, their voices etched with panic. Instinct took over, and I lunged forward, grabbing their hands and pulling with all my might. The shadows recoiled, howling in rage as I fought, pulling them back into the light. But I could feel the darkness tightening around me, the weight of despair closing in. Screams from the void grew louder, surrounding me like a tangible fog, wrapping around my limbs, trying to draw me back. Their tortured cries were overwhelming, drowning out my own thoughts as I struggled against the force of despair. "Hold on!" I screamed, flicking the knife toward the shadowy tendrils trying to ensnare us. The blade glimmered with a light of its own, reflecting the flickers of hope that burned deep within me. With every slash, the darkness shrieked in pain, its dark form blistering against the light. But just when it seemed I might break through, a heavy presence swelled behind me. A chorus of whispers rose, growing louder, drowning out my thoughts. "You'll never be free," they moaned, their voices twisted with malice. "You'll always be trapped." I turned slowly, caught in the hypnotic sway of the figures creeping toward me. Their faces blurred, but those hollowed eyes burned deep into my soul. It felt like they knew me, knew my every secret and shame, feeding on my doubts. I felt myself wavering as the overwhelming weight settled upon my chest. "No, no," I chanted softly, shaking my head. "You can't claim me. You don't own me." I focused on the light, on the warmth of my companions still fighting alongside me, pulling them toward my heart, that flicker of hope that refused to die. "Stand firm," I cried again, pulling my voice from the depths of my anxiety. "Together," the shadows hissed, retreating slightly as my strength echoed outwards. I gazed around and took a step back as the gaunt man's form twisted and morphed, eyes narrowing with contempt. "You are weak," he spat, the shadows behind him seething like a living, breathing entity. Then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered the mirror that had reflected their anguish, the pattern of light that had shattered their chains. "We have to send this back," I shouted, feeling the energy shifting back in our favor. The air crackled as I raised my knife toward the reaching tendrils. "You have no power here," I yelled, pushing forward, feeling my heart race. I concentrated on the light, visualizing the escape, the way out of this nightmare. The shadows reared back, recoiling, screeching in disarray as I plunged the knife downward, piercing the floor. With a bright flash, light erupted from the blade, cascading around the room like fire spreading through dry grass. The darkness screamed in fury, swirling violently as if it couldn't comprehend what was happening. Fingers grasped me from the void, pulling at my clothes, trying to drag me back. But the light lashed out, snapping at the tendrils like a whip, leaving trails of flame in its wake. Everywhere I looked, the shadows twisted, fading into obscurity. And yet, amid the brightness, something deeper stirred, a shadow far more menacing than the others. I thought I saw it out of the corner of my eye, an even darker entity lurking beyond the swirling mass. It pulsed with malevolence, lurking just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to strike. Adrenaline coursed through me as realization dawned. This wasn't merely a fight against the darkness surrounding me. It was a desperate battle against my own fears. Something inside me whispered they would feed on the darkness in me until I became unrecognizable. And that gnawing thought struck like lightning. If I let the fear seep into my heart, I'd be lost forever. But how could I fight when the shadows whispered of my worthlessness? "Fight," I repeated fiercely, channeling every ounce of strength I had. I focused on the light, on all the good I had ever felt, memories of love and laughter that lit the corners of my mind. If I can do this, so can you. Around me, I could see my companions beginning to shake off their shadows, faces lighting with resolve, as they held onto the hope I had summoned. Together, we pushed through the darkness, weaving threads of light in the air like a tapestry of resistance. Then, from the shadows, the gaunt man faced me again, his eyes burning with rage. "You think this trivial light can save you?" He seethed, his form flickering, shifting like smoke. "You're just a spark that will soon be extinguished." But fear fell away, replaced by the unity of our voices. We were standing together, unyielding in the face of terror. "You're wrong," I shouted back, the words erupting from deep within as if they were part of some ancient incantation. And as I did, the very fabric of the darkness began to unravel, the shadows recoiling and screaming in agony. I felt the pull of the abyss still at my back, but it was fading, losing its grip as my friends pushed next to me, finally finding their strength within the light. The gaunt man faltered, the shadows around him ripping apart, revealing a sliver of brilliant light that reflected our combined strength. I could feel it blossoming, rising in waves until it burst forth, igniting everything in its path. Shadows shrieked and writhed as they were consumed by the brilliance of hope, collapsing back into the void. But I knew this wasn't the end yet. As the darkness retreated, I felt a deep rumbling beneath me. The very ground shook, tremors radiating through the corridors. Just then, it hit me, a realization that sent a chill through my spine. The darkness was not just a spirit. It was a manifestation of all the pain I had avoided, the very fears I had buried deep within my heart. And as I saw that malevolent shadow shift again, deeper and closer than before, I understood that facing it would mean confronting every part of myself that I had tried to dismiss, all the pieces of me that had been woven into this tapestry of despair. But could I embrace it? The air around me shimmered, and suddenly, I was swept up in a new vision, a vivid picture of all my fears, my failures, the regrets that had haunted me for years. Each one floated before my eyes, sharp and poignant, revealing the raw truth of my past. I hesitated, feeling the weight of those memories crushing in around me, almost suffocating. But then I felt my friends beside me, solid and unwavering. "You're not alone," they whispered, and their presence gave me the courage to step into the storm. So I took a deep breath, feeling the strength swell in my chest. "I see you," I yelled into the darkness, embracing the shadows as they danced around me. "I'm not afraid. I see you," I yelled into the darkness, embracing the shadows as they danced around me. The air grew heavy, thickening with an electric charge that wrapped itself around my body. Within that moment of clarity, I realized that the darkness pulsed like a heartbeat, alive and aware, responding to my defiance. As the shadows writhed and twisted, the gaunt figure inched closer, his face a mask of fury and hate. "You think you can conquer me?" he snarled, his voice deep and haunting, reverberating through the room. "You are a collection of your weaknesses. They made you weak, afraid, and insignificant." But I felt the warmth of the light growing within me, pushing back against the creeping dread that threatened to consume me whole. "I am more than my fears," I shouted, surprising myself with the conviction behind my words. "I won't let you win." Just then, the swirling shadows began to reveal horrific images, each one like a movie projected on a warped screen. I saw myself as a child, cowering in the dark, haunted by the sound of footsteps echoing in empty hallways. The ghostly whispers filled the air, reminding me of every time I'd run away from a challenge, every scar that had been etched on my spirit. It felt like they were reaching for me, pulling at the core of my being with icy fingers. The shadows morphed, forming the outline of figures from my past. Old friends, family, each one a reminder of something lost. Their faces twisted into grimaces, sorrow in their eyes. "You abandoned us," they whispered in unison, their voices chilling. "You can't escape your choices." Heart pounding, I shook my head, desperate to drown out their ghastly chorus. "No, I didn't abandon you. I'm fighting for us." But the darkness licked at my resolve, and the shadows shifted like a tide, gnashing and biting, eager to pull me back into their depths. I could feel tendrils wrapping around my ankles, slowly tugging me down, almost like they were trying to drown me in an ocean of darkness. The ground trembled, splitting open, revealing an abyss so deep I could not see the bottom. I struggled to keep my footing but stumbled, the void beneath calling to me, promising solace from the pain of existence. Fear crept closer, scratching in my mind, whispering sweet nothings about how easy it would be to surrender, how enjoyable it would feel to let the darkness wash over me, erasing everything. But then I thought of my friends, their faces flickering in my mind, full of determination. I remembered the warmth of our shared moments, the laughter that had broken through the shadows. They were counting on me, and I refused to let them down. Drawing on every ounce of strength, I raised the dagger high once more, its blade shimmering with that pure light we had summoned. I will not be defined by my past. The words burst forth, a battle cry echoing in the void. With a surge of adrenaline, I plunged the blade into the split earth, the knife piercing through layers of shadow. A blinding light exploded from where the blade entered the ground, waves of brightness radiating outward like shockwaves. The darkness shrieked, a terrible sound that vibrated through my very bones, reverberating as if the fabric of reality was being torn apart. The faces of my past flickered in that brilliant glow, some of them smiling, letting me know I was not alone anymore. But just as I felt the darkness begin to wane, that unfathomable shadow at the edge of my vision surged forward, rising from the depths like a nightmare made flesh. It was unlike anything I had encountered before, an amorphous mass swirling with a mind of its own, thousands of eyes swirling within. Each eye was filled with malevolence, glaring at me with an intensity that made my heart race and terror claw at my throat. As it advanced, the ground trembled beneath my feet, and a chilling wind, cold as the grave, swept through me, carrying whispers that chilled me to my very core. You are nothing. You cannot fight what you are, the voices hissed, echoing through the darkness around me. The gaunt figure stepped back momentarily, watching the chaos unfold with an expression of twisted glee. Now, you face the true horror, he sneered, gesturing toward the shadow that encroached, taking shape with a sickening grace. It knows you like you know yourself. The shadow flickered, forming into my very own fears, memories that I had tucked away, buried deep and forgotten. I saw moments of betrayal, isolation, my failures playing out like a distorted film reel. Each flicker pricked at the edges of my sanity, casting me into a whirlwind of confusion and despair. I stumbled back, feeling dizzy as tendrils of doubt reached for me, wrapping around my legs, pulling me closer to the abyss. No, not this, I cried out, fighting the pulling sensation as panic surged through my veins. But the images invaded my mind, whispering that I was unworthy, that I would always be alone. I started to breathe heavily, my heart pounding wildly as more and more memories flooded in, moments of shame, fear, and regret that taunted me like specters from the beyond. Then, the voice of my friend surfaced in the chaos, cutting through the darkness. We're still with you. I heard their encouragement, a light in the overwhelming gloom. With a gasp, I realized I wasn't alone. I had fought my way to this moment, and with every stitch of courage I held, I drew strength from those who stood beside me. I blinked rapidly, squeezing my eyes closed for just a moment, recalling every moment of joy I could summon. Fight back! I screamed into the void, unleashing every ounce of bravery I possessed. We'll defeat you. Together, clutching their hands again, I felt their determination feeding into me, igniting a fire within my heart. The shadows began to shrink, their grasp weakening. I thrust the knife deeper once more, sending another wave of light flooding outward, tearing into the heart of the creeping shadow. The screeches of the dark echoed around us, an orchestra of anguish that only fueled my fight. I could feel pieces of their memories fracturing and splintering as the blinding light surged through, cleansed anew with every motion, carving through the dense atmosphere like a sword through smoke. And for a brief moment, I could see the gaunt man falter, a flicker of fear creeping into his eyes as the darkness began to crumble away. But just as hope surged through me, that massive shadow lunged forward, its multitude of eyes fixing onto me, fixated with a ravenous hunger that threatened to consume all I had worked for. In that moment, I understood there was no escape until I faced what lay beneath. "I will not let you take me," I screamed, feeling every part of me rise in defiance. Taking a deep breath, I visualized every piece of my fears, every haunting memory, pushing through the pain and doubt that had burdened me. It surged through my veins, pulsing like a vital organ, ready to be released. "You are only a reflection of my struggle. You can't control me," the shadow roared, its mouth a cavernous void that unleashed a torrent of darkness, swirling around me like a tempest. Yet, at the heart of that storm, I held to the remaining shards of light like lifebuoys in a raging sea. With an unexpected rush of courage, I hurled the knife straight at the dark heart of the shadow, where its form coalesced into a massive, writhing mass of despair. The blade sliced through the darkness, and as it connected, the void exploded in a brilliant flash of light that scattered the shadows like dust. Light flooded my vision, and I was momentarily blinded as warmth enveloped me, washing over me like a comforting wave. The scream of the shadow echoed away, fading into nothingness, and I could feel the oppressive weight of despair lift, like a storm cloud dissipating under radiant sunlight. But in that brightness, I sensed a shift in the air, a quiet, unsettling presence lingering at the edges, reminding me that this battle was not over, that something deeper awaited beyond the light's protection. As I squinted against the newfound radiance, I felt a gnawing dread replace my earlier resolve. What if this wasn't the end? What if I had merely uncovered another layer of the nightmare waiting for me? In the distance, the faint sound of laughter floated on the wind, eerie and disjointed, growing closer until it surrounded me. But this wasn't the laughter of joy. It was mocking, sinister, a remnant of all the lost souls entwined in this darkness. Not wanting to let it in, I steadied myself, gripping the knife tightly, ready for whatever horrors lay ahead. "I am not afraid," I reminded myself fiercely, but uncertainty danced in my chest. As I took a step forward, the very air around me seemed to shudder, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for my next move. The faint sound of laughter floated on the wind, eerie and disjointed, growing closer until it surrounded me. I felt a chill creep up my spine, each chuckle dripping with malice. It was the kind of laughter that echoed in abandoned places where innocence had long since faded. My heart raced as I turned slowly, seeking the source of that unsettling sound. Shapes began to materialize from the corners of the dimly lit room, flickering like old film projections. One moment they were there, and the next they were gone, almost like a mirage teasing my senses. I squinted through the brightness, but the light only revealed more shadows creeping back into the folds of the darkness. Suddenly, I saw them clearly, ghostly figures drifting about, their features twisted and contorted as if caught in eternal agony. They seemed to be searching the ground, clawing at invisible barriers, their faces wearing expressions of desperation and sorrow. "Help us," one of them wailed, the sound a pitiful howl that broke the eerie stillness. I took a step back, heart hammering. My instinct screamed at me to run, to escape this nightmare that felt all too real. They were the echoes of lost souls, trapped and wandering, forever marked by the darkness they had succumbed to. "You can't help them," another voice chimed in, smooth and slithery, wrapping around me like a snake. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice shaking, fear clawing at my insides. "Why are you showing me this?" The laughter returned, now entirely surrounding me. "You think you can escape your fate?" A figure materialized before me, cloaked in shadows. Its eyes glowed like embers, crawling under my skin as it stepped forward. This is just a taste of what's to come. Panic took hold. The once warm light that had engulfed me began to flicker, battling the encroaching darkness. I wielded my knife like a lifeline, trembling but determined, unwilling to let the shadows snuff out my fire. "I will not give in to you," I shouted, trying to drown out the madness. As if my defiance unleashed something dormant within the space, the very walls began to pulse like a heartbeat, shuddering with a violent energy. The atmosphere felt thick, oppressive, making each breath a struggle. I could see the figures growing agitated, their hands clawing at the air, as if trying to reach me through the breach of light. "Join us," one of them screamed, the sound echoing like shattered glass. "You'll never be free. You're just like us." Their words cut deep. I felt a wave of doubt, a tiny voice inside whispering truths I had buried. The nights I'd spent alone, the moments I'd felt utterly lost, they surged forward as memories, each a reminder of how close I had come to surrendering. The shadows lengthened, creeping closer, and suddenly, the figures began to merge with the darkness, swirling around like a tornado of despair, trapping me in their frantic dance. I gripped the knife tighter, feeling it pulse beneath my fingers, urging me to stay grounded. "You don't control me," I screamed, diving for the heart of the chaos. But as I plunged into the spiraling mass, I felt a chilling rush, as if the darkness was alive, tasting my fear. It engulfed me in a vice-like grip, the laughter turning into howls of torment, echoing around me as I fell deeper into the shadowy void. Then everything shifted, and I found myself standing in a desolate landscape, the sunniest spots completely hidden, replaced by an eternal twilight. An endless field stretched around me, littered with remnants of despair, twisted trees with gnarled branches that clawed at the sky, and fog creeping along the ground like ghostly fingers reaching out for me. The laughter faded, replaced by ominous whispers that seemed to emerge from the very ground beneath my feet. I turned slowly, scanning the horizon filled with a peculiar emptiness. "You're lost," the voices hissed, their tones laced with twisted glee. "Where am I?" I asked aloud, the echo haunting me. But the shadows only shifted, dark tendrils curling around my ankles like coy serpents, pulling me deeper into this strange abyss. The air felt stale, and there was an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to every breath. It was as if the ground itself were alive, feeding off the pain and anguish, swallowing them whole. I stumbled over a hidden root, sprawling against the cold earth as panic clawed at my throat. I could feel their presence closing in, their chilling breath a caress against my neck. "You wanted to escape us?" One shadow purred venomously. "But there's nowhere to hide." Rising to my feet, I retraced my steps, desperate to find a way back, but the landscape twisted with every movement. The trees shifted, blocking my path, and the laughter returned, a maddening reminder that escape was but an illusion. "You're trapped in your own mind." With every ounce of determination, I pushed forward, feeling the knife's weight pull me down, anchoring me against the chaos surrounding. "I am not trapped," I shouted defiantly, acknowledging it was a fight against myself, against the darkness I feared. Images of my past world before me, a flash of a birthday party where laughter turned to silence, the faces of friends who had faded away, the moments of joy tainted by my absence. They taunted me, whispering that I had always been alone. And then it hit me. The looming shadow was made of everything I had tried to flee from. I realized that I had to confront them, not just push them away. "You do not define me," I bellowed, thrusting the blade forward as I faced the swirling mass of memories. The shadows recoiled, screeching as the light surged once more, illuminating the area with a brilliance that momentarily dispelled their forms. For a heartbeat, silence filled the space, the echoes of laughter shrinking away, replaced by sweet stillness. But I knew deep down it wasn't over yet. The ground shook ominously, and the trees around me bent and twisted, bending to the will of the darkness, now rising from the depths. It was a malevolent force, more powerful than before, angered by my defiance. "You think this is over?" a whisper hissed, resonating deep within me. The shadows surged back with a vengeance, the air turning icy as tendrils wrapped around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. "You cannot escape what you truly are." In that moment, I felt my heart racing, fear flooding my veins, but deep within the storm, a flicker of resilience rose. "I am a survivor," I roared, breaking free of the grip, pushing back against the shadows as they lunged forward. I grasped the knife tighter, and with one swift motion, I aimed it at the heart of the darkness swirling above me. I refused to be devoured. I screamed, plunging it down once again. The blade pierced through the ground, light erupting like a star exploding in the night, blinding the dark figures that lurked around me, tearing at the fabric of their existence. All around me, shadows wailed and writhed in agony as their forms began to disintegrate, each flash of light a reminder of their futile grip on my soul. I felt the weight of every despairing moment lift, replaced with a fierce determination. But that shadow lurking at the edge of my vision grew stronger, more relentless, its laughter echoing against the encroaching light. Yet even as I stood in defiance, I could sense the dark entity waiting in the distance, cloaking itself in the remnants of my fear. I had driven back the phantoms of my past, but the true test was still ahead. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for what lay next, knowing that I could not turn away from the final confrontation. Reality trembled and shifted around me, the laughter lingering like a ghost, sweet yet disturbing. It was time to face the darkness head-on, and I would do it with the strength of the light I had forged. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself for what lay next, knowing that I could not turn away from the final confrontation. The atmosphere shifted, growing heavier, clinging to my skin like an oppressive fog. I looked around, the flickering light casting strange shadows on the ground, distorting reality into something sinister. The laughter from before faded into an unsettling stillness, but it left behind a bone-chilling silence that wrapped around me. As I stood there, the darkness began to twist and undulate, taking form yet again, more defined, more powerful than before. It was as if it fed off my fear, the very essence of my dread, making it stronger. I could see the outline of the shadow clearly now, a grotesque figure rising from the darkness, its form shifting like smoke caught in a gust of wind. It towered over me, with eyes like hollowed pits that seemed to delve into the very core of my being. With each monstrous breath, the ground trembled, and whispers clawed at my mind, reminding me of every weakness I had ever felt. "Why do you resist?" it hissed, its voice a sickly sweet drawl that chilled my heart. "You know you cannot escape. You belong to me." The words slithered through the air, wrapping around my throat like a noose, squeezing tighter with each moment. "No!" I shouted back, voice ringing with defiance. "I am not yours." But doubt crept into my heart, a nagging thought that maybe there was truth in what it said. I could feel the reality of my past, the years of hiding my fears and grief, pooling in that abyss, unwilling to release me. As if sensing my hesitation, the shadow lunged, a wave of darkness rushing toward me. I raised the knife, its blade glimmering with the last remnants of light I had conjured. The instant it made contact with the rushing darkness, a pulse of energy rippled through the air, sending shockwaves through the ground. The impact sparked a frantic struggle, the light pushing back against the shadow, illuminating the space around me for just a moment. I saw the faces of those lost souls, their eyes wide and pleading, urging me forward. "Fight!" they screamed in unison, their voices melding into one desperate chorus. The mass of darkness recoiled but quickly regrouped, pressing closer, tightening its grip. I could feel tendrils wrapping around my wrists, chilling my skin, trying to pull me back into their depths. Memories surfaced like drowning swimmers, clawing for my attention. Dark nights, empty rooms, and all those moments of fleeing from confrontation. "Embrace it. You cannot win," The dark figure cried, menacing laughter weaving into the air, echoing off the trees. Swallowed in confusion, I faltered again, just for a moment. But I thought of my friends, their faces my guiding stars in the oppressive night, and I recalled the promise I had made, to fight for myself and for them. "No!" I screamed, lifting the knife with renewed fervor, channeling all my fear and rage into that single act of defiance. I thrust it forward again, feeling the sudden surge of light erupt around me. The brightness swallowed the shadows, cutting through the dark with a brilliant force that sent the tendrils recoiling. The figures swirled around, anguished and furious. "You can't destroy us," they wailed, their voices rising in pitch until they converged into a shriek that pierced my ears. It felt as if their despair was clawing at my sanity, pulling me into a whirlpool of chaos. Yet, despite the clamor, I could hear a different sound, the soft whispers urging me on. "Fight! You have the power," they said, a warm embrace beneath the chilling fear. I started to remember my own strength. Each moment I had pushed through when it was easier to fall back. Each time I had fought against the darkness, crawling closer. Suddenly, I felt a surge of energy, a warmth blooming within my chest, sparking from deep inside. With every ounce of determination, I gathered it all: the joy, the pain, the memories, and the moments of light. "What you are is just a shadow," I said, staring into the abyss, my voice steady. "You have no hold over me." With that, I thrust the knife deep into the heart of the darkness, where it twisted and expanded, enveloping me in a whirlwind of swirling shadows. I could feel the air grow heavier as the void belched forth the grievances that had haunted me, but the light pulsed brighter, illuminating every corner and cranny of my soul. A blinding flash erupted, swallowing everything in its brilliance, and I felt the shadows shriek with a fury that rattled my bones. They writhed and contorted, their forms twisting in agony as light tore through the darkness. It felt like I was at the center of a storm, and every fiber of my being quaked with the effort. And oh, the shadow howled, its monstrous figure beginning to unravel. I could see it fading, its features melting away into wisps like smoke dispersing in the wind. "You can't do this. You cannot escape." But in its feral cries, I felt something shift within me, the weight of that relentless past lifting, and I tapped into the reservoir of light that surged from my soul. "I am free," I shouted, feeling exhilaration boom through my core. In one final thrust, I pushed the blade deeper, carving through the darkness with a fury that screamed of survival. The shadow convulsed, absorbing the light like a sponge, but it was too late. "This is my life," I roared, and with that, I felt the shadows dissolve, the last remnants of their grasp fading into the ether. A brilliant explosion of light erupted, blinding me momentarily. Colors swirled, vibrant and alive, everywhere I looked. When I regained my sight, I found myself standing on solid ground. The air was clean, free from the taint of despair. The oppressive darkness had retreated, and I was surrounded by an ethereal glow. I could hear the whispers again, but now they were different, gentle, comforting. "You did it," they said, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. Yet, joy was tainted by a creeping sense of uncertainty. The shadows lingered at the edge of my periphery, murky and ever-present, a reminder of the battles I had fought and would continue to face. I felt a chill run down my spine as I turned slowly, scanning the bright yet unsettling horizon, knowing this victory was only the beginning. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the knife in my hand, a symbol of my fight and the strength I had gained. But as I stood there, a subtle shift in the atmosphere rippled through the space, making my heart race once again. The ground trembled underfoot, and a black mist began to emerge from the fringes, spiraling toward me like a hunting predator. My gut tightened with fear as I realized the shadows were regrouping, massing in the distance. "Did you think it would be so easy?" The voice echoed, clearer now, a chilling familiarity creeping into the atmosphere as the dark mass undulated toward me. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't let it in again. "You can't have me!" I yelled defiantly, steeling myself against the oncoming wave. But the laughter that followed held a strange sense of mockery, as if it knew I was far from safe. Once more, the darkness surged, a tide threatening to sweep me away. I tightened my grip on the knife and prepared for the inevitable clash, feeling the point of no return hurtling toward me. In that split second, flooded with fear, yet driven by newfound resilience, I understood that this battle wasn't over, only transformed. I lifted the blade, ready to face what lay ahead, determined to fight this relentless darkness yet again. Once more, the darkness surged, a tide threatening to sweep me away. I felt a whirlwind of anxiety and resolve coursing through me, the air thickening with an impending sense of doom. With every heartbeat, I braced myself for the confrontation that was seemingly unavoidable, a sinister presence looming larger, consuming the light I had fought to reclaim. As the shadows advanced, I could hear haunting whispers weaving through the air, individually recognizable, yet incomprehensible. They pulled at the edges of my consciousness, attempting to pry open the doors of my memory. "Remember us," they hissed, their voices dripping with malice. "You cannot escape your past. It will always find you." The ground beneath my feet crackled, and the temperature plummeted. An icy breeze swept through, raising goosebumps on my skin. I glanced back at the horizon, where the golden glow had begun to dim, overshadowed by the dark clouds swirling above. Panic threatened to grip me, clenching my stomach like a vice. Each step backward felt like surrender, but standing still was a death sentence. I tightened my grip on the knife, feeling its weight anchoring me to the moment. "Not this time," I muttered, steeling my resolve. I would not allow the shadows to take me back. I had fought too hard to reclaim my light. Suddenly, an ear-piercing shriek pierced the silence, reverberating off the trees like a shattering glass. The sound clawed at my mind, causing my blood to run cold. From the depths of the darkened mist, forms began to materialize, weaving through tendrils of darkness, twisting and writhing like serpents eager to strike. Each figure that emerged bore a face I recognized, yet distorted into grotesque masks of fear and sorrow. "Join us," one silhouette howled, its voice dripping with a spine-chilling desperation. "We are your shadows." As it lunged toward me, its mouth opened like a gaping chasm, revealing rows of jagged teeth glistening ominously in the dim light. I instinctively stepped back, heart pounding as I fought off the wave of panic threatening to consume me. The others followed, their movements frantic and erratic. I could feel their anguish pressing against me, an oppressive force determined to drag me down into despair. "You cannot fight what you are," they screeched in unison, their voices rising to a maddening crescendo that seemed to shake the very ground beneath my feet. Just as I began to falter, the glow of the blade pulsed warmly against my palm, rekindling the fire within. I took a deep breath, drawing strength from the memories of those I loved and the moments of triumph I had fought so hard to claim. "You are not real," I screamed, the conviction in my voice ringing through the chaos. With a fierce thrust, I drove the knife forward once again, my resolve fueling its luminous blade. The light exploded outward this time, illuminating the dark figures, causing them to recoil. They shrieked in agony as pieces of their forms began to unravel, dissolving like smoke caught in a gust of wind. But the darkness pressed on, undeterred. The laughter returned, low and throaty, echoing through the air, wrapping around me like a living shroud. "You think you can defeat us?" it taunted. "We are a part of you. You can never escape." The ground shook violently, causing me to stumble as I fought to regain my balance. The knife felt heavier, almost like it was pulling me into the void alongside the shadowy figures. I refused to give in. They were a reflection of my deepest fears, manifestations of every insecurity I had ever harbored. Desperation surged within me as I charged forward, fighting to confront these twisted visions of my past. "You will not control me," I shouted, choosing to face the shadows instead of retreating into fear. The knife's glow flared brightly, creating a barrier between me and the encroaching darkness. Each step I took felt anchored by newfound courage, even as the shadows clawed at my ankles, trying to trip me up, whispering doubts and regrets in my ears. Memories flooded back. Each face, each moment lost, a tapestry of my life that had been woven with threads of light and dark. Suddenly, I was standing in the center of the chaos, my energy coiling tightly around me like a shield. "You are mere reflections," I roared, gathering the last of my strength as the shadows surged toward me, tendrils curling like serpents, ready to swallow me whole. "I won't let you drag me down." As I surged the knife forward with all my might, the brilliant light exploded outward in waves of radiant luminescence, illuminating the entire space, pushing the shadows back with blinding force. I felt the power of my memories, those precious moments, drive the darkness further and further away until the figures began to scream, their forms unraveling and dissolving into nothingness. Yet amidst the chaos, I could feel the force of one particular shadow pushing against the luminous barrier, defiant and relentless. Its countless eyes drilled into me, full of rage and rejection, and it bore a resemblance to me as well. The fears I could not let go of, the anxieties I kept locked away. "Why fight it?" it rasped, the voice pulling at my heart. "You know you cannot change who you are." The doubt welling up inside threatened to break me. But in that moment of wavering resolve, I remembered all I had endured to get here. Every step forward had been a declaration of my worth, a testament to my survival, and an acknowledgement of my strength. "You are just as real as I let you be," I whispered, more to myself than to the shadow. "But I am not you." With that, I plunged the knife once more, focusing all my energy into that single act of defiance. Light exploded like a sun birthed anew, enveloping everything in pure brilliance. The dark figure shrieked and writhed, its form beginning to fracture and splinter under the intensity of the illumination. In that blinding fury, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me, a release from the burden of fear that had chained me for so long. The shadows dissolved, their anguished wails fading into silence until I was left standing alone, breathing heavily in the serene aftermath. But as the last remnants of darkness evaporated around me, the world shifted yet again. Beneath me, the ground began to tremble, and the air thickened ominously. It became increasingly clear that my battle was not over. This was merely a temporary respite in the ongoing war. My heart thundered as I scanned the horizon, squinting into the distance where foreboding clouds continued to swirl, dripping darkness like ink spilling onto a canvas. I could see shapes lurking in the distance, far worse than what I'd faced before. Their silhouettes flickered in and out, heavy with a malevolent hunger, more shadows gathering to join the chaos. "Is this all you've got?" I shouted defiantly into the distance, my voice echoing with bravado. I readied my stance, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through my veins. No matter how many times I fell, I would rise again. Each shadow was a piece of my past trying to reach me, but I would not lose myself. As I stood firm, the realization washed over me. I was not alone in this fight. I could draw strength from every connection, from every bond one had formed along the way. In that moment, a wave of clarity surrounded me, and I understood that the light was not just within me. It was a force that could be shared. The storm drew closer, a dark tide threatening to overwhelm me, but I was ready. I felt the warmth of hope unfurl within my chest, pushing back against the darkness filtering in from beyond. I raised the blade high above my head, feeling the warmth of the light mingle with a renewed sense of purpose. I would face whatever came my way, no matter how terrifying. With the shadows closing in, I took a step forward, ready to claim my place against the wave of darkness. The air was electric, crackling with tension, as if reality itself was holding its breath, anticipating the chaos to come. The shadows coagulated at the edges of my vision, swelling like a dark ocean tide eager to engulf me. Yet within me, a fierce determination flared, igniting my spirit. As the first of the dark figures lunged, I felt the chill seep into my bones, an ancient evil that sought to freeze my resolve. Their grotesque faces twisted in a dance of malice, their eyes flaring with an insatiable hunger. "Join us," one of them hissed, its words sickly sweet and dripping with temptation. "You know you belong with us." The voice slithered into my thoughts, curling around my mind like a viper. I shook my head, forcing the words out. "I am not yours." The knife in my hand burned warmly, its light flickering in defiance. I plunged it into the ground, and a shockwave of pure energy rippled outward, forcing the figures back momentarily. They screamed, the sound a cacophony of anger and despair, echoing endlessly in my ears. The darkness didn't relent. A large mass twisted together, forming a towering figure that loomed over me, its shape shifting and unstable. I could feel its presence pressing down on me, a palpable weight that threatened to crush my spirit. It loomed closer, and with it came a smell, foul and acrid, like decay and shadows, suffocating my senses. "Why resist?" it growled, the voice a low rumble filled with twisted affection. "You cannot escape what you are. This is your true form." It pointed a gnarled finger toward my heart, and I felt a sharp sensation digging deep within, drawing forth my hidden fears like poison roots. Flashes of memories filled my mind, moments of doubt, pain, and failure that I had tried to abandon. I could see my past intertwining with the darkness, each thread a reminder of what I had fought to overcome. Panic clawed at my throat as I struggled to keep the memories at bay. Then I remembered the light, the warmth that surged from every act of kindness I had given and received, the friendships I had forged through laughter and sorrow. "You lie!" I screamed, channeling my rage and pain. I let it fuel the warmth instead of the cold. "You don't define me!" With fervor, I raised the knife again, and the glow brightened, illuminating the figures surrounding me. The shadows hesitated, their features twisted in confusion. "What is this light?" A voice crackled, barely concealing the fear that crept into its tone. There was power in that light, a radiant energy that reminded me of how I had reclaimed my own worth. As I fought against the shadows, I felt an indescribable connection to every person I held dear. I could almost sense their presence beside me, encouraging me, pushing me forward. "I'm not alone," I whispered, feeling a swell of confidence flood over me. "You cannot take that from me." With a renewed sense of strength, I launched myself toward the monstrosity before me. The knife led the way, slicing through the cold air with determination. The shadows recoiled in terror, retreating like mist before the sun. I infused every ounce of light I had into the blade, focusing on the connection to those I loved, fueling the blade with their warmth. They screamed as the light struck, fragments of darkness scattering like ashes caught in a breeze. "No!" The towering figure roared, its voice reverberating through the ground and rattling my bones. "You'll regret this." With each word, the shadows thrashed violently, trying to maintain their grip on reality, but it was too late. I had pushed them back, and their fear was palpable. But in the depths of the receding darkness, I could see the new shapes forming. Even as I fought against one threat, another began to materialize, slinking and creeping from the corners of my vision. These were not the twisted forms of fear I had faced before. This was something different, a new level of terror undulating in the darkness. I stepped back, the urgency of the situation flooding my senses. The new figures were less defined, almost formless, but I could feel a malicious intent emanating from them. Wisps of shadow, darker than the night itself, covered the ground like an endless sea, creeping toward me with a deliberate slowness that felt unnerving. "Feel the truth of your isolation," one of the new shadows whispered, its voice like ice scraping against my skin. I shuddered, the weight of loneliness pressing down like an anchor. "You cannot escape it." We have always been here, always will be. A vision of me drowning in an abyss of sorrow flashed through my mind. I could hear the laughter of friends ringing hollow in my ears, replaced by an echoing silence that stretched for miles. The ground seemed to quake in understanding with the sickly truth. In the echoes of their fading laughter, the sensation of abandonment gripped my heart tighter. "No!" I shouted, pushing the thoughts aside, determined not to let the shadows weave their insidious narratives. I felt the knife growing heavier in my hand, but I could not let it weigh me down. "You are not my reality." But the shadows closed in, their ink-black forms roiling around me. "Let us show you," they hissed, weaving their way around my legs, trying to break my stance. A sweeping dread filled me as they wrapped around my ankles, chilling me to the core. The darkness was alive, pulsing and seething, and I could almost feel it probing my soul for weakness. I closed my eyes for a moment, envisioning the warmth of sunlight, trying to remember what hope felt like. The connection to my friends surged again, infused with the strength of shared experiences. I thought of their laughter, their confidence and indomitable resilience as they faced their own storms. And suddenly, the warmth returned, filling me with potent energy ready to illuminate the darkness. I forced my eyes open, a fierce grin spread across my face. "You think you can break me?" I shouted defiantly into the swirling depths. The shadows shuddered, their forms wavering as I summoned a wave of light bursting from my core, casting the creeping darkness away from me like sunlight chasing away night. The shadows screamed as the light enveloped them, their rage mingling with terror. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, a new feeling emerged, creeping along my spine, a sense of dread. Something darker was still there, lurking just beyond the reach of my light. Shadows converged again, gathering into a mass that whispered in a cacophony of voices, each more chilling than the last. "I know you cannot fight forever," they chorused, a chorus of doom that sent shivers racing through me. "We will always find a way back. You will tire. You will falter." The darkness expanded, devouring the light around me, twisting my fears into solid forms. I felt a chill grip my heart as figures of regret began to draw close. Memories of times I felt alone, ashamed, and lost. They hovered just outside my reach, whispering insidiously, "You thought you could escape, but we are part of you. We are your shadows." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the ground, shaking me to my core. A crack formed along the surface, and I noticed darker shapes pooling from within, spilling forth from the crevices as if the earth itself was unleashing its terrors. I staggered back, horrified, all my defenses feeling faint against this overwhelming nightmare. As the shadows spilled outward, a figure emerged from the depths, a towering presence cloaked in darkness, its features concealed beneath a hood that seemed to absorb every flicker of light. A heavy energy radiated from it, a force that called to every insecurity I had been trying to fight off. "Do you think light protects you?" it rasped, its voice rolling like thunder through the air. "You cannot outrun your true self." My breaths grew shallow, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavy on my chest. "I will not succumb," I yelled, forcing the light to expand, even as it flickered under the crushing force of the darkness. But I could feel the light waning, the shadows moving closer, whispering sweet phrases of despair. "What is there to hold on to?" they taunted. "You are weak, alone, just like all of us." Just when I thought all hope was lost, I reached deep within, grounding myself with memories of love, strength, and resilience. I could visualize their faces, the friends and family who believed in me, even in my darkest moments. I remembered the warmth of shared laughter and how we had pulled each other through times of trials. Together, I whispered fiercely, knowing I had to summon every bit of their strength along with my own. "Together, we are light." As I lifted the knife one final time, I felt the energy surge like a tidal wave, drowning out the fears, drowning out the whispers promising despair. A brilliant flash erupted, illuminating the dark figure before me, the warmth dispersing the suffocating cold as the light spread in every direction. The shadows began to scream, their forms contracting, twisting away from the illumination as they disintegrated, lost in the brilliance. But even amidst their retreat, that daunting figure remained, anchored in the darkness. Its haunting presence still felt as a vile whisper clawed at the edges of my mind. This is not over. I readied myself, knowing that this would be a battle I couldn't simply win. The darkness would always return, lurking in the shadows, but I wasn't alone. I had the power of light within me, ready to face the unknown ahead. The ground shook beneath my feet as I braced myself, my every nerve tingling with the anticipation of what was to come. I could feel the oppressive darkness swirling around me like a storm, heavier than before, as if summoned by my defiance. I stood my ground, heart pounding, knowing that I would have to confront this looming terror head-on. The dark figure loomed larger, more defined now, its features becoming clearer in the shimmering light. It was distinctly human, but twisted in a way that made my stomach churn. Its skin glistened like wet stone, eyes burning like embers poking through the blackness. The air felt electric, brimming with tension as it leaned closer, a nasty smile creeping across its face. "Do you really think you can fight me?" it taunted, voice smooth and oily, slithering into my ears. "You've only scratched the surface of your own darkness." The shadows around it seemed to pulse with approval, thrumming like a heart, dark and heavy. I tried to steady my breath, my pulse quickening with each heartbeat. I could almost hear the whispers pooling like a sickening fog. With a surge of courage, I raised the knife again, its blade shining with renewed vigor. "I will not let you consume me," I shouted, but the darkness twisted and responded with an eerie chuckle that sent chills racing up my spine. The laughter echoed, gaining volume, filling my mind with dread. Shadows flickered in and out of focus, each forming grotesque faces that reminded me of my own insecurities, the failures, the moments of doubt I had buried deep. I took a step forward, forcing the weight of my fears aside. "You're wrong," I insisted, determination flaring in my chest. "I am not defined by you." But even as I said this, the shadows writhed and curled around my ankles, cold tendrils wrapping tighter, drawing me into their eerie embrace. The pressure grew unbearable, squeezing my heart as I felt the shadows dragging me toward the abyss. "You can't escape," they whispered, the voices a chilling symphony that echoed through the darkness. "We are your past, your pain. Embrace us." I struggled, fighting against their grasp, but memories flickered like shadows behind my eyes, each one a shackle, dragging me deeper into despair. Suddenly, a vision engulfed me, a room filled with heavy silence, the faces of my loved ones blurred, like watching a scene through a fogged window. I saw their expressions twist into disappointment and sorrow, their eyes hollow. "You're all alone," they seemed to say, shadows lurking just past their smiles, waiting for me to falter. I gasped, pain rising in my chest like a tide. Then the darkness exploded. Just as I felt myself about to surrender, rage ignited within me. I thought of every person who had ever stood by my side, their faces lighting my heart like a beacon. I remembered their laughter, their encouragement, each memory erupting into my mind like fireworks. "No!" I roared, my voice firm and filled with conviction. The brilliance of the knife surged, illuminating the suffocating shadows. I slashed the blade through the darkness, creating a path of light that pushed the shadows back, forcing them to writhe like wounded creatures. I could see the true faces of the dark figures now, twisted and horrified by the light. They screeched, the sound a mix of anguish and fury that reverberated through the air like a death knell. But even as I felt the tide turning, I noticed the towering figure growing more agitated. Its eyes glinted like polished stones, narrowing as it began to flail wildly, drawn toward the remnants of its own kind. "You think this light can save you?" It spat, words dripping with contempt. Your feeble attempts will only invite more darkness. I barely had time to react as the shadows frayed and reformed, twisting around the figure, merging into something larger, more grotesque. It transformed into an amorphous mass, changing shape with each pulse of darkness that rolled off it, mimicking forms from my memories, faces of regret and shame, familiar yet distorted beyond recognition. Each one reached out toward me, their fingers blackened and sour. The air crackled, an electric tension surrounding me as I felt the darkness surge again. It wrapped around my limbs like chains, pulling me closer to the mass. I struggled, fighting against their sickening touch, but the force was too great. "Let go!" I screamed, pulling against the chains tightening around me. But all the more shadows crept closer, and I could almost taste their bitterness. Then, in a frenzied moment, I stumbled backward, the weight of the knife pressing against me, grounding me. I took a deep breath and opened my eyes, focusing on the light shimmering within. "You cannot have me," I declared, energy rising fiercely within me. I channeled everything, the love, the strength, the very essence of determination pulsing through my veins. I felt a warm surge, and I plunged the knife forward, a blinding light flooding the darkness, overwhelming it like the first rays of dawn breaking through a stormy night. The mass shrieked, the sound piercing through the veil of shadows, and the tendrils writhed violently, releasing their grip as if scalded by the brilliance. Yet, just as I believed I had won, something deep within the growing darkness began to shift. The air felt heavier, stifling, as an all-encompassing shadow expanded before me, suffocating the light, and in its depths lurked something malevolent, something ancient that stirred with the fury of 1,000 lost souls. Fear crawled up my spine as I realized this darkness was different. It felt older, rooted in despair that transcended all memories I had ever faced. Its presence radiated pure malice, clawing at the edges of my reality. I felt its gaze bore down on me, and I recognized the weight of a cosmic sadness, a force that had fed on suffering for eons, awaiting the perfect moment to engulf the last remnants of light. "You thought you could escape me?" It rumbled, voice deep and resonant, shaking the very ground I stood upon. I swallowed hard, uncertainty creeping in as a chill seeped into my bones. "You are nothing but a flicker in the dark, destined to fade into oblivion." The shadows began to swirl, tightening around me again, swirling like a maelstrom. I tried to swing the knife, but the weight felt unbearable, as if the darkness was holding me in place with an invisible hand. I could only watch in horror as shadows coiled around me like serpents, their whispers curling into my ears, each word sending a fresh wave of despair crashing through me. "Your friends can't save you," they hissed, the voices churning into a frenzy. "They are but specters now, and you are truly alone in this fight. You invited us in, remember? We are the fears you tried to bury, and now it's time to face your truth." With every heartbeat, the darkness pressed closer, amplifying the weight of dread that threatened to snuff out the last glimmers of hope. All around me, the light flickered weakly, shadows creeping back to reclaim what they had lost. My vision blurred, and I felt my determination wavering. In that moment, despair washed over me like a tidal wave, dragging me under the weight of my fading light. I struggled to breathe, to think, but just as I felt myself drowning, a flicker of defiance ignited within. I thought of my moments of joy and purpose, the times I stood back up when the world tried to keep me down. Renewed, I forced myself to remember. I pictured the faces of those who had walked beside me, their laughter piercing through desperation like arrows of light. "No!" I gasped, longing igniting my spirit once more. "You're not my reality. You can't take away everything I am." With that thought solidified in my heart, the knife surged back to life, its glow brighter than I had ever felt before. I drove it into the darkness, pushing against the engulfing shadows with all my might. Light cascaded from the blade, radiating with the warmth of hope, shining like a beacon of resilience against the biting chill of despair. But the shadows convulsed, the darkness swirling furiously, unleashing a final howl that reverberated in my very core. As the light pushed against them, I felt the darkness claw back, and yet the knife pulsed, rallying against the encroaching void. It was a battle for existence. I was not just fighting for myself, but for every flicker of hope that existed in a world overshadowed by fear. More tendrils emerged from the darkness, slithering towards me like lifeless forms. I stood firm, aware that everything I had faced so far was leading up to this moment. I was no longer just confronting my fears. I was defying the very essence of what they represented. The shadows writhed back, swirling around in a tempest as I pressed forward, my determination fueling the blade. "Get away from me!" I screamed, the blade carving a path of brightness in its wake, illuminating the swirling chaos that sought to reclaim me. "I will not let you win!" The shadowy figures shrieked, their cries growing frantic as the light expanded, encasing me in a protective cocoon. The darkness surged back, retreating like ants dispersing from a stomped mound. But it was relentless, growing bolder as it twisted around me in anger, weaving into grotesque forms meant to instill fear. The battle raged, light pushing against the chaos with all its strength. I felt the force of the shadows press upon me, swirling, evoking memories that clawed at me fiercely, reminding me of every moment when I felt inadequate or lost. Each painful truth clawed at my heart, spreading doubt, threatening to unravel me from within. Then I remembered the warmth of my friends' hands, their unwavering belief in me even when I struggled to trust myself. "You will not control me," I shouted, grounding my heart in the memories that pushed me forward, turning pain into strength, transforming anguish into resolve. With every ounce of energy I possessed, I plunged the knife forward once more. A blinding pulse of light erupted, vibrant and fierce, fracturing the shadows around me. They writhed, howling as the warmth flooded their murky depths, leaving only echoes of fear in its wake. Yet, in that fierce moment of triumph, I felt the floor tremble violently beneath me, and the ground split open with a deafening roar. An abyss formed, darkness rushing to claim my very being, as shadows erupted like geysers from deep below, expanding outward in a spiral of malevolence. I gasped, teetering on the edge of the fathomless void, my heart racing as I stumbled back. The malevolent whispers grew louder, their shrieks burrowing into my consciousness like worms, each one a reminder of fragility and isolation. I could see the dreaded face of the abyss growing closer, its features shifting, flickering between threats and taunts, urging me closer to the precipice. "Join us," the abyss beckoned, its voice hypnotic, weaving a spell that felt unsettlingly familiar. "Embrace your truth, and we can end this suffering. Let go of the light. It is not what you need. Alone, you are free." I hesitated, a brief moment of doubt obscuring my vision. The chaos around me roared louder, and for a split second, I felt my will slip. But then I remembered the flickers of goodness, my friends' smiles, the laughter shared, the moments of connection and love that formed a bright tapestry in my heart. "No," I whispered fiercely, eyes narrowing against the darkness. I refused to be consumed. With renewed strength, I turned my gaze from the abyss, focusing wholly on the light within me. I envisioned it expanding outward like a supernova, creating a barrier against the grasping tendrils of shadow. With a fierce scream that echoed through the chaos, I plunged the knife into the void, sending shockwaves of light cascading outward in a brilliant flash, banishing the darkness from my sight. But as the shadows shrieked and retreated, their cries forming a haunting melody that twisted around me, I realized this was only the beginning. The fight was far from over. The darkness only retreated, allowing me false hope. As I steadied myself, the ground beneath me shivered. I stood prepared, knowing that lurking ahead were greater evils still waiting to be summoned from the depths of that chilling void. "Whatever comes next, I am ready," I whispered to myself, feeling the warmth of the blade steadying my hand. With every ounce of courage built from love, and connection, I wouldn't back down. I would fight until my last breath against the shadows that threatened my existence, battling not just for me, but for everyone who ever felt lost in the dark. And so, with my heart pounding, I stepped forward into the unknown, the blade raised, prepared to face the storm that would come for me next, willing to push through the terrifying abyss ahead. The ground trembled beneath me, deep cracks forming like gaping mouths swallowing the earth. I could feel the icy breath of the shadows swirling around, whispering my name in a chorus of despair. They taunted me, eager to drag me down into their depths. "Come join us," they hissed, voices warped and familiar. "You can't fight forever. Let the darkness embrace you. You are not strong enough." My breath hitched in my throat. I clenched the knife tighter, its reassuring weight grounding me as memories began to flood my mind once more. Each one like a flickering candle in a dark room, struggling against the growing shadows. I refused to look back, forced myself to focus on the light, to recall the faces of those who had stood by me during my darkest days. Suddenly, a chill swept through the air, sharper than before. I felt an unseen force pressing in, wrapping around me like a cold blanket, sapping my strength. The knife flickered in response, but the darkness pulsed back, eager to envelop me once more. A laugh echoed from the abyss, deep and guttural, reverberating off the walls of my mind. "Is that all you have? Memories? They won't save you. They are weak, just like you." My heart sank at the words, doubt creeping in again. I took a cautious step back, glancing around at the swirling mass of shadows that danced just out of reach, testing my resolve. The very air thickened with the stench of decay, like something rotten lying just beneath the surface of reality. I tried to shake the feeling, but the grasping shadows tightened their hold, pulling me closer to the edge. Just as I thought the darkness would swallow me whole, I heard a soft voice, like a whisper on the wind. "You are never alone." It was a fleeting sound, delicate yet powerful, reminding me of hope. I looked up, scanning the shifting forms for guidance, but found only flickers of light that began to dim. In that moment, the shadows surged forward as if sensing my wavering spirit. Their forms twisted, elongating into monstrous shapes with ghastly smiles that mocked my fear. I knew this was a test, challenging everything I believed about myself. "Face your demons," the dark figure coiled, its voice a twisted melody. "You can't escape the truth of who you are. You are nothing without us." With a surge of defiance rising within me, I clenched my jaw and raised the knife, feeling the warmth emanate from its blade. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, my voice echoing against the cold void. The shadowy figures recoiled momentarily, as if my words pierced through the darkness. But it was only a momentary reprieve. They surged again, overwhelming my senses. Their screams became a wall of noise, drowning out my thoughts, each one a dagger aimed at my heart. My vision blurred between the swirling shadows and the stark reality of my fears. Suddenly, I stumbled, falling to my knees as the shadows pressed down around me, heavy and suffocating. I gasped for breath, feeling the cold seep into my bones. I realized that this was more than just a battle. It was a reckoning. The malevolence loomed closer, stretching out its skeletal fingers, almost touching my skin, and a wave of despair washed over me, pulling me into darkness. Then, through the mist of fear, I heard that voice again, stronger this time, filled with warmth and light. "Remember your strength. You are loved. Stand firm. Stand firm," I whispered to myself, forcing each word into a vow, a lifeline in the stifling fog of dread. Drawing from the depths of my soul, I found a flicker of light that warmed my chilled heart. With a newfound spirit, I stood up, ignoring the shadows still trying to collapse inward. I could feel the collective weight of their presence pressing down like a fog, threatening to snuff out the light within. I brandished the knife, its glow illuminating the path ahead. Shadows recoiled, faces twisting in horror as the blade shimmered with renewed vigor. I stepped forward, pushing against the tide of darkness. I envisioned it parting before me, revealing a path of light ahead, guiding me through the engulfing void. Your pathetic glow doesn't scare me, the dark figure shrieked, its voice now hoarse and frayed. You are merely prolonging the inevitable. I will never be yours, I declared fiercely, thrusting ahead. The blade burst forth, sending tendrils of light lashing out like whips into the swirling mass. The shadows shrank back, screeching in agony, but just as I felt the tide of victory swell within me, the darkness began to reform. New shapes emerged, floating like phantoms in the air, each bearing the distorted faces of people I had known, friends, family, and even strangers, each one twisted into a mask of sorrow and regret. They began rising around me, clawing toward me, their eyes filled with a pitiful yearning. "Join us! Become one of us!" they wailed, their voices melding into a cacophony that sent ice through my veins. My heart raced as the faces pleaded with me, each one a reminder of something I had lost or never achieved. I gritted my teeth, fighting against the powerful impulse to succumb. I shook my head, forcing my resolve to harden. "Get away," I shouted, my voice shaking with fierce defiance. "You cannot take me. I am more than just my fears." With every ounce of willpower, I plunged the knife again into the mass of shadows. Light burst forth, creating a wave that pushed back against the creeping figures. But as some shadows dissolved into the light, others rushed to fill the void, more fierce and insatiable than before. I felt a rush of panic. Would this battle ever end? But I refused to sink into despair. I drew on every memory of happiness, love, and resilience I had ever known. A shroud of warmth surrounded me, fortifying my heart against the relentless shadows. I stood my ground, channeling all that light into the blade. The knife screamed with energy, the luminescence expanding outwards until it felt like the very essence of my soul ignited and leapt into the fray. The shadows shook violently, their forms distorting grotesquely as they retreated. "You think you've won?" they hissed, the voices jarring and dissonant. "We have only just begun. Your mind is our playground." The ground beneath me trembled, shaking with the darkness roiling like a storm. I fell to one knee, breathless, as the shadows converged again, their claws reaching out, almost touching my skin. Panic clawed at my throat, desperate to break free, but with a fiery resolve, I raised the knife one last time. "I will not be your plaything," I yelled, voice echoing against the oppressive darkness. I thrust the blade forward, aiming straight for the heart of the swirling void, willing the light to pulse brighter than ever before. As the light erupted, the shadows writhed and contorted, howling in agony. They twisted into shapes of smoke and rage, some forming pitiful faces that beckoned for solace. I could feel the chilling grasp of darkness trying to pull me back into its embrace. But now I saw it for what it truly was, a trick, an illusion meant to ensnare my spirit. "Enough!" I screamed, pushing harder against their relentless onslaught. The light flared brighter, a beacon against the overwhelming waves of ebony, blinding me momentarily as it surged outward like a cleansing tide, washing over the shadows. They wriggled and shrieked, forms dissipating like mist under the morning sun. But even as I stood victorious, I sensed the shadows still lurking, waiting for a moment to return. My heart raced, knowing a new battle was on the horizon, a darker force lurking just beyond my reach. As the dust settled, I felt a strange weight lift from my chest. Though the battle raged around me, I could sense a thin thread of hope weaving through the chaos. My thoughts flickered back to the faces that had guided me, the light of love that would always remain. I had faced tremendous darkness and survived, but the journey was far from over. Glancing ahead, I steeled myself for what lay beyond, the shadows still hungering for the tiniest fracture of light within me. As the air pulsed with restless energy, I stepped forward, knife ready, determined to navigate this treacherous realm and confront the twisted reality that awaited. As the dust settled, I felt a strange weight lift from my chest. Though the battle raged around me, I could sense a thin thread of hope weaving through the chaos. My thoughts flickered back to the faces that had guided me, the light of love that would always remain. But as I took a step forward, a cold silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. The shadows, once agitated and shrieking, now hung in the air like a dense fog, silently observing. I could feel their gaze piercing through the veil of light, watching and waiting, their presence low and menacing. My skin prickled with unease, and I hesitated, the knife heavy in my hand. Then, from the depths of the shadows, a low growl arose, vibrating through the ground. It felt primal and hungry, a sound that anchored me in dread. I squinted into the fog, straining to see what lay beyond the swirling darkness. Suddenly, figures started to coalesce, rising from the ground like forgotten memories, their forms shrouded in shadows. Wispy tendrils stretched toward me, tethering me to their morbid past. They emerged, one by one, revealing faces twisted by sorrow and regret. I recognized some of them, people I had known, their expressions frozen in masks of torment. They looked at me with hollow eyes, mouths moving in a silent scream. "You know us," the air around them whispered, thick with despair. "You left us behind. You turned your back on our pain." A shiver shot down my spine, their words echoing like a haunting melody. I took a cautious step back, but the shadows shifted closer, their cries growing louder, an overwhelming chorus of despair that clawed at my sanity. I felt their anguish wrap around me, choking the flickers of light within. "Join us," they pleaded, voices layered like a sad song. "Together, we can embrace the darkness. You belong with us?" "No!" I shouted, fists clenched around the knife. I was more than my fears, more than the pain of my past. I could feel the weight of their sadness pressing down, threatening to crush the fragile light within me. I had fought hard to stand against the suffocating darkness, and I would not relinquish my strength now. Drawing a deep breath, I steadied myself, focusing on the light emanating from the knife. I would not let them draw me into their depths. "You are not my truth," I screamed, the light flaring brighter, shattering the gloom momentarily. But they pressed forward, each step fueled by my hesitation, determination etched into their twisted faces. In their eyes, I could see my own fears mirrored, a reflection of doubt and despair I had tried to bury. "You cannot escape us," they sneered, advancing with a relentless hunger. "No matter how hard you fight, we are always here. You live in the shadow of our torment." With every heartbeat, the shadows grew bolder, weaving into grotesque shapes, the whispers wrapping tighter around me, suffocating my resolve. Panic surged as the air thickened, every breath tasting sour with fear. I could feel myself crumbling under their weight, memories of regret clawing at my heart. Yet, in that suffocating moment, I thought of the warmth of friendship, the laughter shared, and the connections that had buoyed me through despair. "I am not alone," I reminded myself, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Summoning my strength, I raised the knife once more, its blade glowing fiercely. "I will not be consumed," I cried out, thrusting the knife into the space before me. The light erupted again, a shockwave bursting through the shadows, illuminating the sorrowful faces writhing in agony. They shrieked, contorting as the light pushed them back, the sound reverberating through the shadows like a clap of thunder. But even as I felt the tide of victory swelling, darkness slithered back, more insidious than before. I braced myself, a sense of dread creeping in. The shadows that fled were not truly gone. I steadied my breath, the knife trembling in my grip. I wasn't finished yet. The shadows twisted, reforming their shapes, but now I could see the darkness moving like a living creature, persuasive and cunning, ready to strike again. Then came a voice, soft and insidious, trailing through the air like a cold breeze. "Look around you," it urged, slithering into my thoughts. "What have you lost? Your friends are gone. They have abandoned you. You're fighting a losing battle. My heart dropped at the words, uncertainty creeping in. I glanced back at the ever-growing darkness behind me, the figures morphing into shadows of my own making. They held memories I had tried to forget, mistakes, failures, moments of weakness. You are nothing without your pain, they murmured. Embrace it, and you will find peace. The shadows surged forward, each one carrying despair in their wake, grasping at my mind and dragging me towards memories I wanted to escape. I fought against the crushing weight, reminded of my vow to confront this darkness, but their whispers burrowed deep, a festering wound I had yet to heal. As I staggered, feeling the shadows close in, I could sense the pull of those memories threatening to drown me. I concentrated on the blade, its glow flickering, almost drowning in the encroaching darkness. I had to focus to find my core strength. In that moment, I closed my eyes and remembered my friends again, their laughter ringing in my ears, the moments we shared flooding my mind. I thought of the strength forged in those connections, the warmth radiating through shared burdens. I would not let that light be extinguished. With renewed resolve, I raised the knife, channeling every glimmer of hope into the blade. I will break free, I shouted into the encroaching void, the light blazing brighter than before. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the blade cut through the tide. But even as I thrust the knife forward, the darkness congealed once more, shaping itself into something larger, more sinister, a vast, devouring maw waiting to swallow me whole. A primal fear gripped my heart as I gaped at the swirling vortex of shadows, each tendril pulsing with malevolence. "Fear us," they cried, their voices a chilling harmony, drowning my thoughts in a cacophony of dread that resonated in my bones. "You were never meant to escape. You belong with us." I took a step back, my mind racing, heart pounding in my chest. This was the true face of my fears, the embodiment of everything I had ever tried to suppress. The shadows swirled violently, dragging me closer to the abyss, and it felt as if the very air around me thickened, crushing my spirit. But I would not yield. The knife glowed fiercely in my grip, its light a brilliant shield against the encroaching darkness. "I am here," I shouted. "I am alive." With a roar of defiance, I lunged forward, the blade piercing through the massive shadows, releasing a blinding pulse of light that shattered the nightmare surrounding me. The darkness shrieked, unraveling under the scorching brilliance. But just when I thought I had triumphed, a new form materialized amid the chaos. It was gigantic, an amalgamation of the faces I recognized, swirling and twisting, a grotesque display of everything I had ever feared combined. Its voice boomed, echoing in my soul. "You cannot escape your essence. You will always be part of us." My heart raced as the shadowy figure loomed closer, its eyes filled with haunting familiarity. It was every doubt I had ever faced personified, every regret made flesh. "I will swallow you whole," it growled, teeth bared like daggers, dripping with swirling darkness. I gathered every ounce of courage I possessed, feeling the warmth of the knife pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "No!" I shouted fiercely, this time resolute, as I launched myself against the looming dread. "You do not control me." With a swift motion, I swung the blade as hard as I could, the light exploding around me, illuminating even the darkest corners of the swirling mass. I felt a rush of energy surge through me, growing stronger than ever before. This was my moment, my reckoning, and as the howling darkness engulfed me, I pushed through with all my might, the knife carving a path of brilliance that fought against the tidal wave of despair. Perhaps I could break free, perhaps I could escape, if only I believed in the strength of that flickering hope. In that haunting silence, I would fight to reclaim not just my light, but the very essence of who I was, a beacon against the shadows that sought to consume me. With every ounce of my spirit, I would endure, for the final battle was yet to come. With every ounce of my spirit, I would endure, for the final battle was yet to come. As the darkness roiled around me, I could feel the weight of every fear pressing closer, suffocating me in its tight embrace. Shapes darted just beyond my vision, whispering my name in taunts that echoed off the walls of my mind. The ground beneath me quaked, and I stumbled as if the earth itself were trying to swallow me whole. Then a low, rumbling laughter emerged from the shadows, chilling me to the bone. "You think you can escape?" the voice sneered. "You are merely treading water in a sea of despair. Relinquish your hope. It will only lead to more pain." Panic clawed at my throat, and I glanced around, searching for any sign of light amidst the oppressive dark. But what I found was worse. Grotesque hands stretching out from the darkness, reaching for me with thin, bony fingers that twisted unnaturally. They writhed and groped, desperate to pull me into their murky depths. I felt a surge of dread as cold fingers grazed my arm. It felt like ice, a shocking contrast to the warmth of the knife still clutched tightly in my hand. I jerked away, heart pounding, and in that moment, clarity sparked inside me. "I will not let you take me," I shouted, my voice shaking but defiant. The shadows recoiled, hissing in unison. "Foolish child," they replied, their voices dripping with malice. "You can fight, but you will always return to us. It is inescapable. You will learn." I couldn't let them win. I raised the knife, its light illuminating the dark, hideous faces contorting in rage and desire. Their empty eyes flickered with recognition and regret. This was a grotesque mockery of my past, pulling at the fragile threads I had woven from hope and strength. "I see you for what you are," I declared, kicking forward, weaving through the grasping shadows. Yet as I pressed on, tendrils of darkness wrapped around my ankles, dragging me down. I fought against them, the knife slicing through air, light exploding in every direction. Each slash seemed to free those trapped in the grasp of despair, faces among the darkness flickering like dying embers. And for a heartbeat, I thought I could reach them. But the shadows laughed, deep and horrible. They grew denser, billowing like smoke in a storm, and I could feel my strength wavering. The creeping cold surged through me, threatening to extinguish the flame of resolve I'd ignited. The world around me twisted, becoming a mirror of agony and hopelessness, shadows stretching infinitely in every direction, warping the very notion of reality. I squeezed my eyes shut, clenching my teeth, forcing my heart to remember joy, moments that made me smile, friendships that filled my soul. I envisioned my loved ones standing by me, their faces illuminated by an inner glow that starkly contrasted the darkness surrounding me. I needed to hold on to that vision, to let it guide me through this grotesque nightmare. But as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw a figure moving in the shadows, pulling my focus away from the warmth of my memories. It loomed taller than the rest, its form obscured by heavy darkness. "You think you can escape?" it whispered, voice like gravel, pulling at the seams of my resolve. "You want to believe in light? You are as lost as the souls trapped here. You are a part of this horror." A chill snaked along my spine as I watched the silhouette twist closer, distorting into the shape of someone familiar, someone I had lost. It was my past, my regrets, laughing at my feeble attempts to push forward. "Come back to me," it beckoned, the voice draped in affection, yet laced with a sinister undertone. "You know where you belong." "No," I replied fiercely, lifting the knife as an act of defiance. "I'm not the person you remember. I am stronger than my past." My voice reverberated into the darkness, echoing with newfound strength. The shadows writhed at my words, recoiling as if stung. The familiar face melted into a faceless mass, their features twisting into a nightmarish reflection of despair. I pressed forward, the knife glowing steadily, its light pushing the shadows further from me. But they surged, aggressive and chaotic, becoming a storm around me, pressing in with reckless fury. Once again, I felt their cold breath, their whispers creeping into my mind, hoping to rekindle the doubts I had fought so hard to silence. "You can't hide from your truth. You are defined by your failures. Embrace it, I shook my head violently, forcing my thoughts to center on the light, the vision of hope that felt so real and comforting. Each step I took, I envisioned a barrier rising, a shield against the night. The shadows shrieked, their cries intertwining into a cacophony of despair that was almost deafening, filling me with a sinking dread. Suddenly, the ground beneath me cracked open, gaping like an abyss that threatened to swallow me whole. A rush of darkness streamed from the fissures, the faces of my fears rising from the void, reaching desperately, their ghostly hands beckoning me to join them in the void. "You are meant for this darkness," they whispered, simultaneously seductive and horrifying. Terror surged through me, but I dug my nails into my palms, focusing on the burst of light. "I refuse!" I screamed. I plunged the knife into the ground, feeling the ground tremble beneath the impact. The light surged again, blasting forth in radiant waves that rippled through the darkness, forcing it back once more. But the shadows twisted and formed anew, rallying with a vengeance. They blended together, a living mass of despair that climbed toward me, hungry for my spirit. I could feel their rage, their desperation to consume. "You can't escape," they screeched. "You will become one with us." The shadows lunged, the stench of decay wafting toward me, thickening the air like smoke, choking the warmth I had fought to hold on to. I felt panic rising in my throat, grasping for breath as tendrils of darkness wrapped around my torso, squeezing tighter, like a serpent coiling for its prey. In that terrifying moment, I thought of everything I loved and everything I had fought for. I thought of the lives that had touched mine, their joys, their triumphs. Their stories were now infused with mine, giving me strength. And just then, a flicker of anger ignited inside me, burning brightly against the oppressive void. "I will not be your prey," I yelled, channeling every ounce of defiance into the knife. I drove it deeper into the ground, focusing on the light shimmering from its blade, feeling the warm swell and push against the encroaching shadows. A blinding flash erupted, engulfing me in a sphere of brilliance that shattered the air. I could hear the howls of the shadow figures, their cries cutting through the dark like knives. "This isn't over," they screamed, their voices fading into the ether as the light expanded, pushing them back into the abyss from which they emerged. But even as the light enveloped me, I could feel it flickering, the shadows regrouping on the edges, biding their time. The battle was far from over. I steadied my breath, feeling the pulse of the knife beneath my fingers, and prepared for whatever came next. The darkness still lurked, waiting for a moment of weakness to capitalize on. I knew I had to stay vigilant. This was only the beginning of a much deeper struggle, and I could not afford to give in. Around me, the landscape shifted, shadows receding but also reshaping, becoming more abstract, more twisted. It was as if I stood on the threshold of an ever-deepening nightmare, a labyrinth of despair where each pathway led to memories I had buried, fears I had hidden. I felt disoriented, like I was lost in a waking dream, where the familiar blurred into the eerie unknown. With my heart racing, I took a cautious step forward into the shifting landscape, the knife gleaming in the low light. The path curled and twisted, almost alive, beckoning me deeper into the heart of darkness. Each step felt heavier, as though the shadows were clawing at my feet, trying to drag me back into their depths. Eyes widened in terror. I forged ahead, the sense of impending dread tightening around me like a noose. This was my trial, a journey to unearth the darkest corners of my soul. And I needed to find a way to face it, because I could not escape the shadows forever. With my heart racing, I took a cautious step forward into the shifting landscape, the knife gleaming in the low light. I could feel the air thickening with an unsettling energy, as if the entire atmosphere were holding its breath, waiting. Each footfall sent ripples through the ground, and I thought I could hear the echoes of my past whispering back, my doubts, my failures, and the memories I tried so hard to bury rising once again. The path twisted into a dark corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. Old photos hung on the walls, flickering like dying stars against the blackness. Each image captured moments of joy and sorrow, memories of people I had loved and lost. Their faces, once vibrant, now wore expressions of despair, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You should have saved us," one of the faces cried out, mouth opening wide in an eternal scream, as if the very walls bled from the wounds of my past. A chill crept up my spine, paralyzing me. I felt as if I were losing my grasp on reality, becoming entangled in a web of guilt spun by the shadows. I tried to step back, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The photos began to morph, faces twisting into grotesque masks that laughed and taunted, their voices a cacophony that echoed inside my head. "You ran away. You abandoned us," they chorused, drowning me in a sea of regret. Desperation surged through me, and I could feel the darkness clawing at the edges of my mind. "No!" I yelled, fighting against the suffocating weight, clutching the knife like a lifeline. "I won't. Let you take me." Suddenly, the corridor warped, twisting violently as if alive. The walls pulsed and heaved, narrowing until they nearly closed in on me. I dashed forward, heart pounding, desperate to escape the suffocating embrace of anguish. A flicker of light up ahead urged me on, promising sanctuary. But as I moved closer, the light flickered, revealing a door half hidden in the shadows. It seemed ordinary, but radiated an unsettling aura, as if something on the other side had been waiting for me. A thrumming sensation pulsed through the air, and I felt the urge to step back. What if this is a trap? I wondered, but the shadows were closing in, and I felt their icy fingers brushing against my neck like a caress, ready to pull me into their depths. With trembling hands, I grabbed the doorknob, its surface icy against my skin. A strange vibration thrummed through me as I turned it slowly, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room that reeked of mildew and despair. Inside, puppets dangled from the ceiling, their strings twisted and tangled. Each figure had a grotesque expression, frozen in a combination of horror and sorrow, as if they were eternally trapped in a nightmare. I stepped further in, mesmerized but horrified by their lifelike detail. "They were once like you," a voice whispered from the shadows, sounding almost right beside me. "They thought they could conquer their fears. But look at them now. Forgotten, trapped, lost to darkness." I spun around, knife raised, but saw no one behind me. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift, a living entity breathing around me. "You're scared, aren't you?" The voice continued, now echoing in my mind and making it hard to focus. "Every step forward brings you closer to the inevitable truth. You will never be free of us." My grip tightened around the knife as I fought against the encroaching dread. I forced myself to take a deep breath, focusing on the warmth it emanated, but the cold seeped back in, challenging my resolve. The puppets twitched slightly, as if they could sense my anxiety, their glassy eyes reflecting my own turmoil. Suddenly, one of them broke free from its strings, leaping down with a horrifying screech. Its limbs contorted in unnatural angles, and it lunged for me, mouth stretching unnaturally wide, revealing darkness instead of a throat. I gasped and stumbled backward, adrenaline surging. "Get away!" I shouted, swiping the knife in front of me, the blade cutting through the air with a hiss. The creature stopped, hesitating, caught in the glow of my knife. It reeled back, and for a split second, its contorted face softened, revealing a glimpse of the person it once represented. A flicker of recognition washed over me. A friend lost to torment. A connection severed by the very darkness that threatened to consume me now. "No!" I shouted, the revelation fanning the flames of my determination. "You are not nothing. You can't take me or anyone else." With that, I lunged forward, plunging the knife into the creature's chest. Light exploded from the impact, cascading through the room and sending the puppets scattering backward into the shadows with a chorus of wails. But even as the creature fell silent, I realized the cocoon of darkness was still alive, swirling around me like a cyclone, roaring with fury. I could feel its energy building, witnessing the shadows coalesce into something larger, more terrifying. The door behind me slammed shut, sealing me in this nightmarish chamber. In horror, I watched as the darkness solidified into a towering figure, almost humanoid, but its form was a mass of writhing shadows and empty void. "You think you can fight us?" It thundered, voice echoing like thunder in a storm. "You are brimming with frailty, a flicker against the storm. We have existed before you, and we will continue to exist long after you fade. You cannot overcome us." My heart raced as fear washed over me, but deep down I felt something shift. There was a spark within me, reminding me of the light I carried, the strength of the knife in my grip. I let out a defiant scream, drawing on the energy of every moment I had fought through and gathered. "I won't back down. I will stand against this darkness." The shadows roared in protest, the figure surging forward, its twisted limbs stretching out like a monstrous grasp. I raised the knife high, feeling the light course through me. "I am not afraid," I declared, bringing the blade down with all my might, aiming for the heart of the shadowy monster. Light exploded at the moment of contact, a searing brilliance that ripped through the darkness like a cleansing flame. The figure screamed, an ear-splitting howl that vibrated through my bones, echoing with the pain of countless lost souls. The very walls of the room trembled, cracking like glass, and I could see the darkness fracturing, swirling around me in chaotic patterns. But even as victory felt within my grasp, I could see new shapes rising from the shattered shadows. Images flooded my mind, dead faces trapped in eternal despair, cries for help, and the grasping hands of those I loved. "You cannot escape the truth of your nightmares," they shrieked, voices bleeding into one another, merging into a horrific symphony that clawed at my sanity. I gasped, the vision overwhelming me as I staggered back, struggling to hold onto the light. Yet I felt the knife's warmth pulsing more intensely, calling me to remember the bonds I had forged, the love that had kept me alive. I could see them clearly now, each face illuminated by the light of my memories. "Keep fighting," their voices rang out, growing stronger against the haunting cries of the shadows. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs, and steadied myself against the rising fear. I wouldn't let the darkness claim my heart. With renewed determination, I plunged the knife into the ground, feeling the power surge through the earth beneath me. "You do not own me," I shouted back at the gathering darkness. "I am reclaiming my light." The ground shook violently, cracks spreading outward like lightning, and waves of brilliance radiated from me. The abyss roared in fury, the monstrous figure writhing against the tide of light, its edges flickering as if it couldn't maintain its form. Yet, I could sense the shadows gathering for one final assault, desperate to pull me back into their embrace before everything shattered. "Fight! Remember," the voices of my loved ones urged, and I held on to that as I pressed deeper into the surge of energy swelling within me. With the knife in my hand, I would not falter. I closed my eyes and envisioned each of them, every cherished moment, the warmth of laughter and love wrapping around my heart like a shield. I refused to be afraid. "I am stronger than my fears," I declared, feeling the light blaze brighter with each word, illuminating the oppressive darkness surrounding me. In that moment of clarity, I focused on one final, powerful swing, the blade slicing through the air as I cried out once more, "Begone!" The light erupted, consuming everything around me as the shadowed horror shrieked one last time, drowning out all sound. A brilliant blast of white light engulfed me, and I surrendered to its heat, knowing that I had stood against my worst fears and fought back. The light engulfed me, a fierce warmth that filled me with hope, yet it felt strangely hollow, as if I were stepping into a vast unknown. When the brilliance began to fade, I braced myself, half expecting to find the shadows still lurking, waiting for me to falter. As the light dimmed, I felt an unsettling shift in the air. I blinked, taking in my surroundings, and found myself in a new space, one that seemed to oscillate between dreamlike and nightmarish. It was a vast landscape of gray, where nothing existed except for shifting shadows and strange phantoms. The ground beneath me felt soft and spongy, like walking on the surface of a rotting sponge. Each step squelched unervingly, the sound echoing around me. Tendrils of mist curled up from the earth, wrapping around my ankles, seeking to pull me down into the depths of this disquieting land. No more hiding, I whispered to myself, pulling the knife closer as if it could ward off the chill that stalked me. With every breath, I felt iciness creeping into my chest, dark memories clawing at the edges of my realization. Those shadows were relentless, manifesting not just as spirits, but as feelings, anxiety and despair bubbling just beneath the surface. I journeyed forward, feeling drawn toward a low, sinister hum emanating from somewhere ahead. As I approached, I noticed shapes materializing before me. Forlorn figures surrounded by swirling darkness, each encapsulated within their own bubble of misery. I recognized some of them, familiar faces twisted in torment, their eyes pleading for me to help them. "Don't listen to them," a deep voice resonated behind me, causing me to whip around. A hooded figure stood just a few feet away, obscured in the shadows. Its voice held an uncanny familiarity that sent chills down my spine. They are lost, just like you can be. They want to drag you down into despair. I took a step back, feeling the weight of uncertainty. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to sound confident, but my voice trembled at the edges. With a slow, deliberate movement, the figure lowered its hood, revealing a face that was both familiar and terrifying. My own visage contorted with anguish and regret. "I am what you fear to confront," it said softly, yet the tone resonated with malice. "You cannot outrun yourself, no matter how far you go. This place feeds on your guilt, your denial. It will claim you if you let it." My heart raced as I shook my head, backing away slowly. "No, I am not like you," I spat, trying to muster my strength. The shadows lurked as if waiting for my weakness to expose itself. The knife felt heavier in my grip, the warmth fading as darkness hungering at the edges of my vision threatened to drag me down. "Accept it," my doppelganger growled, stepping forward with an eerie grace. "You will never be free. You must yield to the darkness. It is what you were always meant to be." Suddenly, the figures around me began to wail, their haunting cries merging into a discordant symphony of despair. Each sound swept through me like icy fingers, chilling my spine as I felt the floor beneath my feet ripple like water. Panic surged through my chest. "Stay back!" I shouted, raising the knife defensively. The shadows responded to my fear, swirling violently, merging and separating like a chaotic dance. One shadow moved closer, tendrils reaching out, brushing against my skin, sending a wave of nausea through me. I gasped, feeling memories flash before my eyes, moments of loss, grief, and every time I had turned away from life. "You cannot deny who you are," the voices echoed louder now. "You are part of this. You have always been—" "No!" I screamed, unleashing all my fear and anger. In a wild rush, I thrust the knife into the ground, determined to anchor myself to something real. Light burst forth again, illuminating the nightmarish landscape, pushing back the shadows that clawed desperately toward me. The darkness screeched in protest, pulling away, yet I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. I had faced fear and dread, but now I was confronted by the part of myself I had long ignored. I had to face it. Deep down, I felt the need to learn from this, to acknowledge the shadows that were part of my history without letting them define my future. With each deep breath, I took a step forward, allowing the warmth of the knife's light to guide me deeper into the heart of my fears. The figures shifted and flashed around me, their expressions morphing into something more desperate, as if they sensed my resolve. I knew I had to reach them to help them escape this torment. "Listen to me," I shouted, my voice steadying with newfound conviction. You do not belong here. You can rise above this darkness. As the light pulsed brighter, the shadows weakened against it. The forms slowly began to flicker. One was a friend lost long ago. Their eyes filled with sadness, yet a glimmer of recognition sparked within their depths. Slowly, shadows began to peel away, revealing their true forms, trapped inside memories of their pain. "Help us," they chorused with a haunting plea, and I felt the desperation deep in my bones. "Break the chains of despair." I gripped the knife, now glowing vibrantly, the connection to them urging me on. "You don't have to stay here. Together, we can escape," I called, reaching out to them, feeling the warmth radiate from my heart, binding us in an invisible thread of hope. They hesitated, eyes widening as the darkness clung desperately to their forms, unwilling to release its grasp. A low growl rumbled through the air, the shadowed figure of my fears reassembling behind me, its eyes now burning with an insatiable hunger. "You cannot save them," it spat venomously. "They are mine." "No!" I roared back, voice echoing across the foggy expanse, fierce with conviction. "This is their time to break free." With a fluid motion, I slashed the knife through the air, channeling every ounce of doubt and remorse into that singular act. The blade ripped through the shadows, and a pulse of light exploded outward, collapsing the darkness into itself. The figures of my friends hesitated, straining against the heavy weight of despair, but I could see the hope blossoming in their eyes. Together, we could shatter the darkness once and for all. "Follow me," I urged, heart pounding, and I sprinted toward the light. The darkness writhed in agony, shrieks of fury tearing through the air as I led them forward. I could feel its tendrils clawing at the edges, desperate to reclaim its lost souls, but I would not let it. This time, I was the light in this consuming darkness. Every step forward ignited a flare of brightness, illuminating the path as we moved as one. The air grew warmer, lifting the encroaching shadows from around us. I celebrated each glimpse of escape, every moment where the once captured faces glowed with reclaiming hope. But I could feel the heaviness still lurking, a deep, guttural growl promising retribution. Glancing back as we raced forward, I saw the shadow monster forming again, becoming a swirling vortex of darkness, barely held back by the flickering light from my knife. I tightened my grip, knowing the fight was far from over. Yet I felt the warmth of the others backing me, their presence ignited by my resolve. The path was becoming clearer, the pull of the light growing ever stronger. "We are stronger together," I shouted, urging them onwards, awakening the flicker of power within each of them. With renewed strength, we pushed ahead, the shadows lashing out in fury, but they were losing their hold. Fractals of light began consuming the darkness, scattering it like ashes in the wind. The cries of the shadows turned to wails as they were slowly sucked into the chasm I had carved with the brilliance surrounding us. But as the vortex collapsed, I felt a sudden surge of fear. What would come next? Would I face the aftermath of this victory? With the last push of energy, we hurtled into the light, breaking through the surface of a newfound reality. But even as I landed on solid ground, I felt a nagging doubt creeping back in, whispering that the darkness would always be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness to reclaim me. This battle was hard won, but my journey was far from over. The moment I landed on solid ground, I felt a strange disorientation wash over me, like stepping off a never-ending carousel that suddenly stopped. I blinked against the bright light that enveloped me, shielding my eyes. Once the glare faded, I saw a familiar landscape. The forest where I once played as a child, full of life, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting golden spots of warmth on the forest floor. But something felt deeply wrong. The trees loomed larger than I remembered, their bark twisted and gnarled, as if they had borne witness to countless horrors. Whispers echoed through the underbrush, murmuring secrets and warnings. Each step I took sent a shiver racing up my spine, and I felt eyes watching me from the shadows. As I ventured further into the woods, the sunlight dimmed, replaced by an eerie twilight that settled like a heavy fog. I paused, my breath quickening, sensing a familiar dread creeping back in. Every sound, the rustling leaves, the snapping twigs, felt amplified, filling the space with a cacophony of anxiety. It was as though the forest itself held its breath, waiting for something unfathomable to unfold. I reached for the knife instinctively, but instead felt nothing in my pocket. Panic surged. Fear and frustration twisted together in a storm of emotions. Where had the light gone? It was as if the darkness had followed me, lurking just beyond my line of sight, waiting for a moment of weakness to claw its way back in. I strained to hear anything that might guide me, but all I heard were the haunting whispers, echoing through the trees like a mournful choir. Suddenly, I caught sight of a silhouette flickering among the trees. My heart raced as I moved closer, drawn in by a strange pull. It became clearer. A figure stood half hidden behind a tree, a woman with long tangled hair and sorrowful eyes that seemed to peer straight through me. "Help us," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, yet loud enough to chill my bones. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Her lips began to move again, but no sounds came forth, only the hollow winds whistling through the trees. And then I realized her form flickered like a candle about to be snuffed out, fading in and out of existence. A sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, curling around me like icy fingers, and I shivered as the shadows coalesced once more, creeping from the depths of the trees, heavy with intent. They slithered and twisted toward me, and instinctively I backed away. Each pulse of fear sent a chill through my body, but there was something deeper lurking beneath that fear, a realization that gripped my heart with vice-like intensity. I was still bound to the shadows, the very essence of their being held within me, coiling around my memories and regrets, waiting for an opportunity to pull me back into that abyss. The forest transformed before my eyes, trees twisting into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, clawing at the sky. Desperation surged within me, and with it came anger. I shook my head violently, forcing my feet to move. "You will not take me again," I screamed into the oppressive silence, unleashing everything that had been buried within me. But the shadows only swelled further, swirling ominously around me, their whispers rising into a chaotic symphony. "You're one of us," they taunted, voices combining into a deep, echoing laugh that reverberated in my skull. In that moment, I felt a flicker of doubt clawing at my resolve. Was it true? Had my battle really been in vain? I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I will not yield," I growled, pushing through the rising sense of dread. "I control you, not the other way around." The surge of defiance ignited something deep in my core, and I reached into the depths of my memory, seeking the light once again. Imagery flooded my mind. Laughter, friendships, the warmth of love. Even the smallest moments that made life beautiful flashed before me. I poured that essence into my voice, strength bubbling up from within. "I choose to be free." The shadows recoiled, their laughter dwindling to a low, discontented growl. I pushed my fists forward, and the air around me sparkled with a bright light, causing the darkness to screech in anguish. The trees trembled, their forms flickering and screaming as the light consumed them, burning away the dread that had rooted itself so deeply. Suddenly, the shadows began to dissolve like mist in the sun. I felt a weight lift off my chest as I took in the scene, the once menacing figures retreating into the underbrush, their whispers diminished to nothingness. I fell to my knees, breathing heavily, heart racing with the aftershock of fear mixed with relief. But as I looked around, the darkness was not entirely gone. Deep in the recesses of the forest, I could see silhouettes gathering, watching me, waiting silently in the shadows. They seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, their glowing eyes fixated on me, imbuing the atmosphere with an unsettling tension. I stood up, brushing off the dirt and debris, forcing myself to walk forward. What had just happened was a victory, yes, but it felt incomplete. There would always be shadows, whether from outside or within. It was a truth I had to accept, one that could linger like a phantom in the corner of my mind. As I turned to leave the forest, the weight of those waiting eyes followed me. I felt their presence, a reminder of the darkness I had faced, the journey I had survived. I might be free now, but this was only the beginning. Shadows would always lurk, and I could not forget that strength doesn't lie in the absence of fear, but in my acceptance of it. Walking away, I understood my journey was no longer about running from the shadows, but facing them head-on, carrying my knife as both a weapon and a symbol of my fight. In every step, I would find a way to light up the darkness, knowing that true freedom came not from escaping, but from transforming fear into something that I could navigate. And as the memories of my battles faded into the distance, I vowed that wherever I would go, I would carry that light with me, setting forth into the unknown, ready for whatever came next.